All right. So today we're going to be talking about responsive images. Okay. And so it's going to be a little bit of a recap and a step up from what you maybe learned in your graphic design class. And we're going to be, just moving forward in that direction. Um, yeah. So, and then we're going to have an in-class assignment that we're going to do together today, and that'll be kind of the extent of today's class. So, I want to start out just by talking a little bit about the this URL linking video that you guys probably noticed I posted. It's really just I had a couple of questions already, again, about people asking me saying, I don't know which link to do. And do I do the one that says 127.0.0.1? And how do I, and I just thought I'd just put it all to bed finally and send made this little video of what the different links are, which one to submit, how to get, the GitHub paging link and things like that. So I hope that was, if anyone was confused, hopefully that was a helpful resource for you, and you can use that going forward. So that's just something. That's the reason I put that there. Okay, so let's get the ball rolling. I'm going to roll in here to our weekly goodies. So let's just take a quick peek at what's going on for the week. If we look at right here, we're in week 5. Week 5 already. Wow. And we've got our in-class assignment we're doing today. Next week is a work lab. It's a work lab because the assignment is due that class, but it's due at the end of class. So let me just double check on that to make sure that the landing page is due at 12 p.m. on the 16th of June. So next Wednesday at 12 p.m. So that means at the end of class. And that's why we have a work lab, right? So the work lab will allow us to will allow you guys some extra time. Now, if you are having problems or anticipate any issues, then feel free to be there. Right, that's probably a good resource. If you are a little bit, if you get it all submitted, say during the week or ahead of time, then have a good morning, sleep in. You don't have to be here. So it's a little incentive for you guys to get done ahead of time, and then you can basically have an extra 4 hours in the morning, or you can put it towards something else. My time there will be allotted to answer questions regarding specifically that assignment, and then also the midterm, right? Those are the big things that we're going to be discussing, or I'm going to be available for during that class. Yeah, that's it. And just as a heads up, if you show up in the last 10 minutes of class of that work lab and say, I really don't know what I'm doing, I'm just, sorry. If you anticipate you're going to be having problems or something, just come to that class. Okay. So don't use that as a reason to have terrible time management skills. It's there just so you can have little final things. Do your best to try and fix things. If there's something that's just not working for you, then you can kind of put it off to the end and we can fix it. If it's a major issue, just let me know ahead of time. We can get a nip it in the bud before it becomes a problem. So, but anyway, you do have a 4-hour work lab. That should be helpful for you guys to go forward. And then the week following that, we'll talk about animation, and then we're off. Well, you guys are off for a week. I'm not off for a week. They keep us locked in a closet and feed us bread all week. So that's what we have going on there. So that's what's happening for the next little while coming up. Oh, what happened? That doesn't look good. I'll fix that. All right. I'm going to move over to the sorry, let me just reopen that here, but I'm going to move back over to the IMDAC, and we'll kind of get started there. There we go. Week number 5. All right. So in the IMDAC, there's quite a bit going on in terms of there's some really great resources here. Just some topics that you can use to refresh your material. Once again, guys, feel free to look back on the material. Right, you can always just go back and look at Responsive Web 1 if you have any questions about some of anything that we've covered already. But going forward here for week 5, you can feel free to take a look through those. That's really helpful information. This is the picture of this assignment that we're going to do today. The landing page and the prototype are ongoing. And don't worry about the recording, but here's the slides that we're going to be running through today. And I've already got them open here. So we're going to be talking about image optimization. We're going to be talking about file types. Once we understand what file types are and what the different terminology means, it makes it a lot easier to make informed decisions about the information, or about the images that we're going to be using in our website, right? We're going to talk about responsive images, okay, and how to make them, and different ways to accomplish responsive images. And of course, the picture of this assignment. Okay. Is there any questions before we get started? You guys are raring to go this morning, I can see. Okay. I've noticed a large ramp up of people just logging in and sitting on their butt and disappearing, right? So while there's nothing, I'm not going to remove half the class when they're not here or something like that. But just know, guys, if you're just logging in and not being here, you might as well just not be here. I mean, you know what I mean? Like you're paying money just so you can not learn. I don't understand that whole, like, it doesn't. You're not pulling one over on me. You're taking money out of your own pocket and throwing it away. So just for anyone who's watching the recording, or for anyone who's just listening while they're laying in bed or something, that's fine. Just, you're here to learn. So, maybe if you're just ghosting the class, then you're really just robbing yourself. I just noticed a lot of that going on lately, and I just kind of want to put it to bed as quickly as possible, guys. So this stuff that we're learning right now, particularly with responsive images and anything else going forward, is expected standards, right? Once you finish this section and you've successfully done the work for that class, for this week or this module, then it's this is kind of the standard going forward, right? So we talk about responsive images. Well, I'm going to expect that you know and can apply responsive images to everything going forward. I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation. That's why we're in school. So just going forward, that's just a little bit for you there. Okay, so I don't want to give you guys grief first in the morning, but I just have noticed that being an issue, so I want to nip it in the bud as quickly as possible. So let's move on to image optimization, and we'll start with just talking a little bit about images on the web. Images are going to take up most of the downloaded bits on a web page, right? So when we're talking about downloading a web page, what happens is it's going to, obviously the browser acts as a server, and it says go between, and it's you say I want to see google.com, and it says okay, great, and it goes out of the internet and it locates google.com, and it grabs that rendered page and it brings it back and displays it on your screen. But it has to go out and it has to download images, and it has to download any assets that are on that page already, right? And the most downloaded bits on any web page are often going to be images for the most part. So that's something we have to keep in mind. So we want to make sure that we're optimizing our images so that we're keeping the file size low, because you're going to hear me say this a few times. Size matters. It absolutely matters, right? And image optimization really is the process of eliminating, replacing, or decreasing the size of an image while still maintaining quality and visual appeal. And we are going to kind of address each one of these topics. So we'll start with eliminating and replacing images. So the great thing about the modern web is that HTML and CSS and JavaScript and a lot of these tools, they can actually just replace images. So it used to be, for example, that if we wanted to have a gradient background, a gradient background was dark at the top and light at the bottom, I would have to go into open up Photoshop, and I would have to use a great big make a great big gradient, and then I would make it down to 1 pixel wide, just a little one pixel wide, like 1,000 pixels long. And then I would put that as a background on the web page and say repeat X. And so I had this image just all the way across. That's a pretty big image to throw on. That kind of thing can be very easily simulated with CSS now. And so that's a way that I can reduce the page load, right? I can reduce the size of the bandwidth transfer. Okay, that's a very important thing. It doesn't seem like much, but it's a few bytes, Rob. Not a big deal. It may not be a big deal now. We tend to think in terms of free free Wi-Fi, and easily like accessible speeds everywhere we go, and we have LTE on our phones and 5G, whatever. All of this stuff, we think of it as being super accessible. It hasn't always been the case, and in certain parts of the world, it still certainly is not the case. Just as a Point of reference, I used to work for an international nutrition company that did, I think I've talked to you guys about this before, maternal and prenatal health for at-risk and developing populations in the world. And so there might be in, for example, the mountains of Bolivia, where it's not easy to get around, we would have maybe doctors doing a workshop on, I don't know, iron folate or zinc or something like that. And sometimes they'd have to upload data reports or x-rays or something, and the only access to the internet they had was via a satellite modem connected to a cellular phone. So every text message they sent with a picture of a x-ray on it was about $2,000. So you want to believe size matters. Okay, so understanding these types of techniques, and that we only use images where we absolutely need to, is really important. Okay, and everybody's suffered from lag before, where your phone's taking forever, your computer's taking forever to load. Size matters. Things go quicker when we can do that. So using things like web fonts or CSS effects for gradients and shadows and web animations instead of GIFs, that's always going to be a better option than using an image. Okay, so where the image is purely presentational, if there's another way to do it using code, that's probably the better bet. So another thing we can look at is decreasing the size of the images. Okay, and there's a few ways we can do that, right? It always helps to know a few little things. We can look at vector versus raster, the format of the image, the resolution or the compression of the image. Okay, and we'll talk about these individually. So let's start with raster images. So a raster image, and before I go into this, how far down the rabbit hole with this did you guys go in graphic technologies? Did you guys learn all about like image compression and how to optimize images and do that sort of thing?
I feel like a little bit, but I feel like a review would definitely be good for me.
Okay.
Yeah, agree with Rob. We might have touched on it a little bit, but a review would definitely be helpful.
And I think that's what we do in this class, right? Is we really just we kind of touch on topics, we review, and then we expand. And I think that's the really the nice thing about this course, where I wouldn't want to change it too much. Some people find it's really repetitious, or that it repeats itself a lot from last semester. But I think it's important to reinforce these materials. So okay, that's good. So that's what we'll do. So we'll start with raster images. So raster images is basically a grid. It's a canvas or an artboard, if you will. And it's a lot of dots that go across, right, with color in it. That's really all a raster image is. Okay. And we can see that best when we actually use an example. So I'm going to open up a picture of my kitty cat Columbia here, and we see this is that's fine. We have, here's a cat on a little ottoman, and no big deal. Now, when I start zooming, I'm going to go to 100%. When I start zooming in, okay, we're going to start losing visual acuity, and let's just see what happens. We're going to get 200. You can start to see it's grainy. She's got a little eye problem, guys. That's not, I don't hurt her or anything like that. And I'm just going to keep going. Oh, she's so cute. And we can start seeing it gets blocky and chunky, right? And I'm going to scoot all the way in. I'm going to say 1500 pixels, and lo and behold, here's her mouth and nose. But you see, it's really just a big square, a big rectangle in this case, and there is it's a bunch of colors. Okay, so what happens when we take this image and we squish it is each one of these little squares gets smaller and squished together, and you get that constrained look, right? Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate the dots. That's so you get this constrained look, right? And what I mean by that is this idea of, if I'm going to go to image size, I'm going to remove that. I'm going to say 500 pixels. And we get this. This is easily one of the worst things you can do on a web page. If you do this, I'm going to deduct all of so many marks. This is just terrible. And we're going to explain, we're explaining why right now, right? Because this is just a grid of images. All we've done in that case is we've taken all the image data and just crunched it up. Okay. So does everyone kind of understand what a raster image is? Does this make sense when you see it in this way? Right? When you actually zoom in and look at what a raster image is, it's just a block. It's just a bunch of blocks of color. Okay, so that's important to know. And so it means that it's not resolution, they're not resolution independent. So it means that when you set a size on it, it stays at that size. It's great for complex images like photos because it uses all that color data, okay, and it's very specific. Okay, there's different types of raster images, and we'll talk about what they can do. So common formats are a GIF or a PNG or a JPEG or a WebP. Okay, so let's look at them. So a GIF, anybody here call it a GIF? You don't have to identify with that if you don't want to. Unless it's a giraffic interchange format, it's probably it's GIF. I don't know. It's an age-old debate. We'll never really figure it out. I call it a GIF, but anyway. So you might hear sometimes people call it a GIF. Whatever suits their boat. So it was actually invented by CompuServe way back in the day, and they wanted a way to have animations and transparencies beyond what a JPEG could offer. And it's pretty universally supported right now. We still see it being used regularly. It uses what we call lossless compression, and we're going to talk about the two compression types shortly. But this one in particular uses lossless compression. Part of the limitations of a GIF and what keeps the file size pretty low is that it's limited to 256 colors. It's only got 256 colors that it can actually display. Okay, and when you see like an animated GIF, if you're on Discord or using your phone or something, sometimes it looks really grainy and choppy, and it's got big chunks of like now that we know what a raster image looks like, and you can see where it might be really torn down, and the colors are it looks really low grade. It's because they've moved it down. Like if you want to lower the quality of a GIF, you just remove the colors. If you go down to say 64 colors, you're removing a lot of information. A lot of those blocks of color are being merged together. Nice thing about GIF is that supports animation. So we use it for really simple graphics and simple animations. The next one, which will actually replace the GIF or is working on replacing the GIF, is the PNG, or the portable network graphic. Okay, meant to be a replacement for GIF. Very universally supported, and this was even just as recently as like maybe 5-6 years, maybe longer than that, maybe 6 to 10 years ago. Okay, so not very long ago, it's universally supported now, so it's pretty much any browser will handle it. It uses lossless compression. It also supports transparency, although not animations. And so again, we use it for simple graphics, icons, and illustrations. Not really suitable for photography or anything like that. For photography, we use a JPEG, right? And this is the Joint Photographic Experts Group. This one's been around a long time. Okay, you notice that there's an E in there. Sometimes you see a image file and it says JPEG instead of just JPG. That's old school. You don't really need the E anymore. They try and people that were always trying to minimize the amount of or for a while, always trying to minimize the amount of file extensions we have to are using. But it is important to note that there is a difference between JPEG and JPG, even if only in name. Okay, so if you're trying to reference a file that's a JPEG with an E by just referencing .jpg, it's not going to find it. Okay, they're separate things. So JPEG is universally supported. It is when I say JPEG to somebody, even if they're not computer savvy, they know that it means a photograph, right? That's just that's the way it is. Okay, it uses what we call lossy compression. So it's a different type of compression than the other two. It supports a very wide range of colors. But it does so while maintaining a very small file size. And because of that, it's best used for photography. Okay, and that's the thing about a JPEG. I used to have a boss that used to call it a pegger. She'd say, "Rob, send me over that pegger." That was a really weird thing, but I don't know why I told you that. But anyway, so this is an important one. So we see a lot of JPEG, but it has been interchanged a lot with PNG. So those are kind of the two big ones that we're seeing a lot of. As we move forward in the web, we're looking at probably seeing something like WebP, which is a Google invented format, and it stands for web picture. It's going to be a competitor to JPEG. As of right now, it's not universally supported, so it doesn't have good support. It does not have good support in the browsers. Just 1 second. All right, so it does not have really good support. You can use both lossy and lossless compression types, which is really useful. We'll talk about compression in just a minute. They're working on support for transparency and animations, so it'll actually be able to do those types of things. It maintains super small size and is used for photography. So we can use it for anything, but best used for photography. So it's nice it'll be able to have animations and transparencies and photography all built into the same file, because we can just use it as a kind of our one go-to to replace everything. That would be super handy. Okay, as far as raster images go. Okay, so those are all common formats we've seen. There's a couple of other odd ones, but these are the big ones you've seen and are going to see coming up. So let's see what does that look like compared to a vector image. Okay, a vector image, we're using math to create the image. It's actually a vector image isn't a again like a picture of my kitty cat in Photoshop. A vector image is actually a file with a bunch of math that's plotting coordinates and colors and things like that. So it's essentially like RGB. Sorry, like HTML. Okay, more like XML actually, extensible markup language. But we're creating lines and points and polygons the same way we might when we're inside of Illustrator and we're creating points and creating curves and things like that. We can do all of that, those mathematical computations from within the file itself. Now, I know that for most of you who took digital graphics, I know they covered SVG probably a little more in depth, and you guys know how to use that. But it's important to note that it really is just a mathematical file. So they are resolution independent, which means it doesn't matter what the resolution is, because they can just conform, right? Because it's using math to adjust something. As we scale the image up, then the math and the points and polygons and lines inside are just going to mathematically scale themselves, so it maintains crisp shapes. As soon as we resize, it just happens instantly. So vector images work best for images that have simple geometric shapes like icons and logos. Okay, and that's simply because it is a mathematical file. You can open up a SVG file, you can grab all the content, and then you can drop the content of the file right into HTML. That's actually something you can do. You don't have to load a .svg file. It's just the same as with CSS. I can take a bunch of CSS and put it right into my HTML file, or I can load it as a CSS file. And SVG is just a file that happens to end up looking like looking like an image, right? And so common vector image formats we might see are like SVG. So it's again XML based. XML is really just kind of a portable database format that looks a lot kind of like customized HTML, where you create your own tags. It's pretty interesting stuff. You guys are going to learn more about XML when you get into JavaScript and you start looking at JSON and things like that. Again, SVG can be directly inserted into your HTML, which can be useful. Here's something really, really cool about SVG is that you can manipulate those lines and points and polygons using CSS and JavaScript. So you can have backgrounds that slide around, or you can have a animated logo or things like that, because you can just say, I want this point on line 5 to go from this coordinate on the screen over to that coordinate on the screen. And then you'll have this kind of back and forth waving thing in your background. So it's something you can actually do. You can use CSS to manipulate the image, which is really handy. Again, resolution independent. The nice thing is it can be minified. And minified is something you can do with most code. And it's just removing all the white space to save time. If I look up minified code, and if we look at just a visual example, you can see it's just removing all the white space. It looks like gobbledygook. We don't really see it, but as soon as you minify your code, it takes all the white space out and takes all the new lines, and then it basically chunks it all together, because again, size matters, right? Does that make sense, guys? I didn't know if you could do that. You don't just remove all the space. You have to use a tool to do it, but it removes all the blank spaces, because every time you have a tab or a space or a carriage return, that's a byte of data, right? And so size does matter. But you can minify this code to save space in the vector graphic. So again, just like any other vectors, it is used for simple graphics. You wouldn't make an SVG photograph. That would be an insane amount of math and coding inside of the actual SVG. So that's the most common vector graphic we're going to see on the web. Any questions just so far about the different types of raster and vector graphics? Nothing? Okay. All right, so let's just talk about compression. So there's two main types of compression on the web these days when we're talking about images. We have lossy compression and we've got lossless compression. And for these ones, the key is in the name. So lossy compression means you're losing something. It's lossy, right? So it's like you're suffering a loss, right? That's what lossless compression is. And the other option is lossless, which means you are not suffering a loss, right? It's like noiseless or, whatever it might be, right? So lossy means you are suffering a loss. Lossless means you are not suffering a loss. That's the important thing. So with lossy compression, we are eliminating pixel data. So actually, it's going to give us a loss in quality. So if I was, again, to open up this picture of Columbia, which is a little grainy at this size, I'm going to go down to 66.6. Once we started removing some of that color, then we start seeing a quality loss. Okay, and that'll give us a pretty significant size decrease. And we do that we do that in ways that I'm going to show you. I'm going to go to the export and save for web. And right now it's set to a JPEG. I'm going to move it over to a GIF. Okay, here's our 256 colors that we can use, okay, that are available. And once we start removing colors from that, for example, if I go down to 64 colors, okay, you see it starts getting grainier because we're removing the amount of colors that are accessible. So what it's going to do is it's going to try and fix colors together. It's going to try and put colors that are close together, jam it in. If there's not as fine a line of blending, okay, we can start removing colors. We start seeing less and less colors available. This looks like a really terrible GIF that we use on Discord or something. And now you know why. It's because there's only so many colors. It's doing its best. It's pretty good, but this looks like old school, way back in the day on the computer when monitors only supported 256 colors. And so, it doesn't work very well, these lossless ideas, right? Like our lossy ideas. So with lossy, we're actually eliminating pixel data, and that it's going to be a significant decrease in size. But again, there's a quality loss. Now, lossless compression is a little bit different. Let me just go fix that. I can't. Poor Columbia. There we go. Okay. Lossless compression is a little bit different because we're not actually removing any of the pixel data, right? We're not eliminating pixel data. What we're doing is compressing it. Okay. And so it's taking the image and it's trying to say, well, there's if you have colors that are close to each other, we're going to try and merge them a little bit. So if there's only, one or two, points of difference between the color, it says, well, why don't we just merge them? And that's really what it is. We're compressing the data on the pixel. It maintains the quality, but not nearly as much as we would with lossy compression. Did it help for you guys to see the difference when you're actually looking at an image and removing the colors? I'm sure everyone has seen an image that looks like that, right? Yeah. And I think that's why I wanted to open a picture up and show you guys the difference. It's just, you can visually see it. And when you look at the amount of colors that you're removing, of course, those colors are not available, which means we can't fill those pixels up. It becomes so much smaller in file size, right? Again, if I think this actually shows the file size, save for web legacy. So let's see, the original in this case, this is 1.98 megabytes. It says JPEG, even optimized when we compress the data down to 60 kilobytes. It's pretty huge. But as soon as I go over to let's say a GIF again, and we're at 135, and if we go up to say 256, right, it's just a commensurate amount of color. So it just becomes, it becomes pretty obvious what the file size difference is going to be. Okay, so those are the two types of compression that we have, and we always want to make sure we're maintaining that compression by choosing the right size for the right compression for the right image. Most of our software is going to do that for us. So let's talk about resolution. And this is a big sticking point for me. There is nothing that bothers me worse and bothers clients worse than, so for example, you guys, for the most part, are designing a ice cream website, right? A website for an ice cream store. There is going to be no need to submit a website that has an image that is 5,000 pixels wide of ice cream. I do not need a 5,000 pixel wide picture of an ice cream cone when the maximum size it's going to be on your screen is, I don't know, 500 pixels wide. Why are you submitting me, it's a 5,000 pixel wide image, right? So we want to be aware of the resolution, right? Be aware of what we're coding and shrink our images dimensionally. Open up Photoshop, manually shrink our images to fit what we need. And we'll talk a bit more about some coding practice for that as well going forward. But just so we know, the standard is if you submit to me an image that has or a website that has images, what I do is I'll go into it and I'll right click and I'll say open image in a new tab. And then I'll go look at it. And if it's like massive, super wide, it's going to affect the image, your image grade, right? We should be thinking about that. It's part of the web design process. We have to, manipulate our images, make them smaller than, or get them down to the right size or sizes that we need. And just, set up proper compression. There's some great tools out there, things like tinyjpg.com, tinyjpg and tinypng are the same website. And then you can just literally just take the image, drop it right there. It'll shrink the file size, not the dimension, but the actual file size. So we can use in Deriver, we'll adjust the different image size. There's tons of tools out there. So when we're talking about resolution, we think about the higher the resolution, the larger the file size. Okay, that's kind of what resolution means. It's all about the amount of pixels we have. And so we want to avoid wasting pixels. And it's really important to note that the higher resolution screens are going to require larger images. Typically in web, we are looking at a resolution of 72 dpi. That's dots per inch or pixels per inch, whatever it might be. So 72 dots per inch. Okay, that's a standard resolution for the web because we're just looking here on our browser. Now, when we're talking about print, we want to maintain at least 300 dpi. So it's important, again, when we're looking at something like this, if I'm going to go to image size that we're maintaining right now, this is good for web, 72 dpi, right? Look at the size. But if I was to do it for print, for example, I would go to 300 dpi. And when I do that 300 dpi, notice the size changes, right? So that's really important to remember. Okay, so the resolution of the image is going to change things. Now we see is going to change the size. We see this a lot or we saw this more so when pixel density became important when Apple came out with Retina display. Right, with Retina display, everything was super crisp and super sharp. That's because the image had a higher pixel density. Okay, there are more dots per inch. So for every inch on the screen, instead of having 72 dots, little dots within that inch on the screen, it actually had 300 or more dots within that. So of course it's going to be crisper. Even here on my screen, you can see just little bits of like these legacy kind of dots. It wouldn't have that because it would look, we have more dots per inch. We can fill in that space with appropriate pixels. And that's what resolution is. That's why everyone's fighting for higher resolution. If you're into gaming, you always want higher resolution. We're 720p, 1080p, 1440, up to 4K now. It's super crispy. Okay, so resolution is important. When we're talking about website, it comes. The problem is high resolution comes with a high bandwidth costs because we actually have to have a larger file size. Okay, that's a really important thing. Resolution, oftentimes in Apple world, we call it pixel density. In web design, we call that resolution. So let's just take a look at resolution for a sec. Here's just some sample image sizes. At one time, again, once we start, a lot of this is very obvious, but once we start moving up in the pixel density, we say, okay, double the amount of pixels, 3 times, 4 times the amount of pixels. Pardon me. So you can see how quickly it ramps up. So if we want to have 4 times pixel density, we go from 320, the image has to go from 320 up to 1280 pixels. That's huge, right? But our 1280 pixel image is going to be so much crisper when we reduce the file size, okay? Because we have so much more pixel data inside of there available. And when you're talking about a larger image, something like 1280 pixel, that's where you still have to provide a 5,000 pixel image. Now, remember, our browsers, even, for the most part, I know monitors are capable of so much more now, but the human eye and for web design, we don't need to look at a lot of these larger sizes, right? And indeed, we don't even need to look at much more beyond something like that. These are kind of the biggest sizes we need. Even when we're talking about a retina display, we don't need to get too much further beyond the 2x mark. But anyway, here's just kind of give you an idea of how much bigger things can get. So let's just talk a little bit about responsive images. See what we have left. Actually, before we get into responsive images, we're at 8:38 right now. Do we have, excuse me, do we have any questions about what we've covered so far? Just the first part, specifically as it's different file sizes, file types, compression, things like that. Is there any questions? Okay. Mitchell.
In what I'm just a little confused about like the different sizes. So like the ×1, ×2, ×3. Could you just go over it quickly again?
Sure. So this is just when we're talking about pixel density, right? We're talking in resolution. What we're saying is it's dots per inch. So if we look at the screen, if we look at the screen here and we say, okay, here's I would cut it down to a 1-inch block. Now, typically what we do is we would have, we might say in web 72 dots per inch. Okay, again, I can go over here and I can look at this one. If I go to image size, I can look. So here we have pixels per inch or centimeter, but DPI, we might have heard of DPI. So in this case, there's 72 dots per inch. Okay, that's the amount of pixel data we have per inch. Pixel data, that's how many pixels are appear in one. Now, when we talk about getting a bigger resolution, what we're talking about is increasing the amount of dots available in that inch. Let's just again take a look at this. I'm going to open this. I'm going to increase the size of this a little bit. I'm going to go to 1500. Okay, let's move it up and to a spot where we can just see some. Here we go. Okay, so we're at this spot here. We can see for every 1 inch there is a certain amount of pixels, right? When we increase the resolution, let's see if it's going to display right here. If we increase the resolution to print quality, which is 300, we can see that every inch now becomes so much more. We're up to 300 dots for every inch because the image, that's why the image got bigger. So if I break this down to say 700, I mean, it's, let's say 300, I guess, right? It's so much, so many more pixels packed into each, oh, I'm all the way over here. So many more pixels packed into each inch, right? Once again, you can see there's just so many more. That's why it got bigger. So when we talk about dots per inch, we're talking about that visual sharpness of it, right? How much more how many more, I should say, how much more color information is available to us? Does that make it, does that help to be able to see the difference a little bit? Yeah. So the resolution, obviously what we're saying is the more I shouldn't say obviously, but what we're trying to say here is that the more pixels we have packed into that space, the sharper it's going to be, the more access to color data we have, so we can get nice fine gradients or get rid of these kind of little jagged looking edges on images. Because it has more pixels, it can make it look smoother, and that's the whole point of resolution, is smoothing things out. And Apple really nailed that down when they came up with Retina display, because it meant that their monitors could handle pixel densities much higher than a standard monitor. With gaming monitors and things like that, it's different. Now, that brings up another point too. Remember, guys, what you're displaying on the screen, what you might be seeing might be different than me. So if somebody, one of you might have a old school, those really old school monitors that are really wide in the back, the CRT monitors, they call them. If somebody's using one of those, then you're not going to have nearly as many pixels available than somebody who's using, for example, a gaming screen or a Retina monitor, which is meant for larger resolutions. It can handle more pixels per inch. So we have to think about that. Having a high resolution image doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to display that way on the other side. It just means that more pixels available should the browser handle it. And the charts that we showed here are just literally 2 times the amount. So if an image is 320 pixels, and that's standard 72 DPI, as soon as we double the amount of pixels, the image size literally doubles. 320 times 2, 640. Okay, it was just to illustrate best practices going forward, that we don't necessarily need to get into huge images at that point, and just to try and keep the image size small. Okay, resolution is one of those weird ones. It's always good to talk about. Did that clarify a little bit?
Yeah, so essentially, if the 320 pixel image is at 72 DPI, when you go up to the 640, it's then 144.
Yep, yeah, we're exactly just moving up the amount of the doubling the amount, right? And that's the whole thing. As we go up, pixel densities is something we're not using so much anymore. Most monitors handle higher resolutions, so we tend to keep things 1-to-1 as much as possible. They're getting better at removing jagged edges and things like that. But yeah, absolutely, that's what it's all about. And a lot of that's the difference between print. If we have an image that's 300 DPI, if I'm sending something to somebody for web, I'm going to make sure I always reduce it to 72 DPI. That's pretty much the standard. That's what most browsers and website, stuff is going to work at it. Most stuff on the web is going to be at 72 DPI, which is a 1-to-1 ratio. Is there any other, let's see, is WYSIWYG just for monitor resolution? So WYSIWYG is not about, it doesn't have to do with images. WYSIWYG is actually, it stands for what you see is what you get. And it's a type of design, right? So if I'm using Wix or any other web builder where I can drag and drop things, Dreamweaver is an example of a WYSIWYG designer. I can say I want to have a box here, and I would click and I would just, make something happen on the screen. Like if I say, okay, I want to make a box like that, and it would appear. A great example of a WYSIWYG editor that you guys have used probably is Adobe XD, right? Drag and drop. That's what you see is what you get. You don't have to code for it. You're seeing it visually, and that's what you're going to get. Does that help clarify? Yeah. And it's important. WYSIWYG is a weird term. I didn't actually make that up. It's called WYSIWYG. But yeah, WYSIWYG is it's a way of designing. Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily have to be resolution dependent. It all depends on what your output is. Are there any other questions that we might have regarding formats or anything like that? Okay, before we move into responsive images, CSS sizing and coding and things like that, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. It's 8:45 now. I'm going to run a 15-minute timer. I'm going to let our latecomers into the room, give them a little bit of heck for showing up late, and then we'll go forward from there. All right, guys. So you can feel free to head out, and we'll take our 15 minutes from here. All right, guys. We are back. Okay, so let's we went through talking about our for resolution and formats, different things like that. So we're going to move into the actual talking about responsive images and how we can use code to make that work a little bit better. Okay, so that starts with CSS sizing. So it's important to know, guys, when we have an image, okay, if we put an image into a web page and that image is, let's just say it's 5,000 pixels wide, just like you would go and download a large size image, right? So if you download an image from freeimages.com, or it comes right off your phone or your camera, it's going to be fairly large, high resolution. If we take that image and we put it onto our website, it doesn't matter what size we tell it to be using CSS. It's still the browser still has to download a 5,000 pixel image, right? It's still downloading a big image. We're just taking it and telling it to display at 100 pixels by 100 pixels, but it's still 5,000 pixels wide. So it's really important to note that we're still using the bandwidth. It's still downloading that big image. So it's our responsibility to make sure that as web designers, we're actually shrinking that image to an appropriate size before we even put it on the server, or before we even make it available or push it to GitHub or whatever we're going to be doing. So that's important. So just as a point of reference. We'll talk a bit more about that going forward. So, but that's what we're saying here is that by default, if we're taking images and popping them inside of just on our web page, they're going to take up all the space that they need. They're 100% wide by default, so they're going to use up all the space. That's why sometimes when you have a big image, we have a scroll bar at the bottom, right? So what sometimes we want to do is use CSS, and we'll go in and say, oh, I only want that to be 700 pixels wide, but it gets rid of the scroll bar, but the image is still really massive. Okay, and that's kind of a problem. So we can use CSS sizing to actually adjust that. Now, what we can do, even whether it's 5,000 pixels or 500 pixels, we can say we can use a responsive image code to actually make the image fit its container. Okay, so let's just take a look what that looks like a little bit. This is kind of what I would use. Okay, there's a better format, and I'll show you in a second what that looks like. But if we have this div with a class of image container, and there's a width set on this particular div, and we put an image inside. Now, if we don't have any CSS or anything like that, this image is going to display at what's called its inherent width. Okay, its inherent width, or its inherent dimension, is the size that it is by default, right? If I open up my this picture again of my kitty cat, let's go back to a standard resolution. Here we go. Right, if I open up this size of my kitty cat, or this picture of my kitty cat, and I plop this on the screen, right now I can see that the inherent width of this is 720 pixels by 960 pixels. That is the size of this image. Okay, so 100% width of that image is, I think it was 720 pixels. That's the inherent width, right? So if I say be 100% width, it's going to display on my screen at 720 pixels. Would you guys agree with that? That makes sense. 100% or all of the width of this image, as we can see clearly, is 720 pixels. Okay, so it's going to display on the screen at that size. That's the size it's going to display on. Now, what I could do is I could say reduce your file size, or reduce the size. I could say width 500 pixels or width 100 pixels. But what we want to do with responsive image code is we want it to fit inside of its container. So we can use something like this. There's a better version of this has been updated. We would say max width 100% and height auto. That's all you need. So as soon as I say images max width 100% and height auto, they are going to fit inside of their container automatically. Let's break that down. If I said width 100%, right? How big is this image going to be? Well, if it's the picture of my cat, it's going to be 720 pixels. It's going to be whatever its inherent width is. That's the width it was created at. Again, this one here is, I can see the image itself is 720 pixels wide by 960 pixels tall. So that's how big this is going to be. If I say be at the max or be at the width of 100%, it will always be 720 pixels, or the inherent width. If I say max width 100%, then what it's going to say is up to the maximum of 100%. That is a big distinction, right? Be 100% width, or be up to 100% of your width. Do you guys see the difference in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody not kind of get that philosophy? This is a really key. We see this a lot when I always make big fusses about max and min and things like that, because the connotation, or what we're trying to get across, the point there, the meaning of it is vastly different to a computer. A computer lives on ones and zeros. So when I say width 100%, right, then that's a big difference in max width. Let's break it down in a real world experience, right? Let's just say that you and a friend are sitting around, and your friend says, "Oh, I have to go to the I want to go to the market to pick something up for whatever." And you say, "Okay, well, it's the store is exactly 1.12 kilometers in that direction." Right, that is the direction. That's the distance, right? But so it knows that is an exact thing. But if you say it's around a kilometer that way, right, then maybe it's it's a little bit, or no further than a kilometer that way. Maybe it's a bit before. Maybe it's 900 meters or something. There's a big difference between exact and up to or close to, and that's what we're getting at here. So max width 100% means that it will go up to 100% of the maximum, right? It'll go up to. But as soon as we say just width, it means always be 100%. The big difference. So if I say maximum width 100%, it'll say, oh, okay, so I can go up to, but that also means it can't go beyond. I can't, if the container is 500 pixels, then the image will say, oh, it's like probably what, 78% or something. It'll say, okay, that's under 100%, no problem. It'll shrink, it'll stay inside of that. If the container, if this image is 720 pixels and the container is 800 pixels, the image will only ever go as big as 100% of its size, 720 pixels, right? That's an important thing as well. So when it says max width 100%, it won't go bigger than its inherent size, which is, again, in this case, the inherent size is 720 pixels. So if the container is 500 pixels, no problem. This will go up to 500 pixels is less than 720. So this image will just shrink down to fit inside. It'll go up to that maximum. Whereas if the container is 1000 pixels, this image will never go bigger than 100% of its maximum width, which is 720 pixels. Does that make sense, guys? Was that confusing, or is anybody confused by that concept?
The analogy of the 1.2 kilometers is solid.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any issues, or I just want to make sure we understand. This is really a critical thing. You can see sometimes we'll say image class equals responsive image or what. I just set it on all images. It just makes sense at all times to say maximum width 100%, and then instead of display block, in order to hit all browsers for compatibility, I just say max width 100%, height auto. Right? Height automatically match the height to whatever the width is. That'll make sure that all browsers are met. Display of block, I don't use that. That's kind of old school. Yeah, so I'll cover this one more time. So the idea of width versus max width, right? Let's just forget that it says max right now and pretend this image tag just said width 100% for images, right? On the image tag. So that means that you're telling the image to always be 100% of its width. If that image is 500 pixels wide, it doesn't matter how big the container is. It doesn't matter how small the screen gets. The image will always display at 100% of its natural width, which we've determined in this case. I think we just said 500 pixels, right? If I say maximum width, it means it can go up to 100% to a maximum of. Okay, so this implies, okay, the implication here when we say max width, what we're implying or we're trying to get at is that means that it's a range. It can go from zero width, the minimum width, which is 0, all the way to the maximum. It implies a range. So it allows us the flexibility to say if the container is smaller than whatever the inherent width, then this number will just drop. It'll go, the width of it will display lower, right? Think of it, let's look at another example. Let's imagine you're driving on the highway and if you see a speed limit sign or you see a sign, they call it a speed limit sign for a reason, right? Because it means up to 100 kilometers an hour, not exactly 100 kilometers an hour. Because otherwise you'd get on, everybody would be doing exactly the same speed and you could never slow down, right? Couldn't pass anyone to go, like there would be, that would be a weird thing. That's why it says max speed, right? So that you can go up to that, because sometimes you need to go slower to account for traffic, or right, there's barriers or things inside of that you have to live within, so that you're not going crazy, right? So when we say maximum speed 100 kilometers an hour, it means you can drive up to that speed. You could drive 80, you can drive 90, you could drive 20, probably not 20, but you get the idea. And it's the same thing here. When we're saying with this image, it means it can go up to 100% of its natural size. But if I just say width, it means always be 100% of your natural size. Did that help clarify a little bit, Jimmy? Great. Yeah, and that's a bit important distinction. So we say, you're very welcome. That's literally my job. So max width 100% and height of auto. And what that's going to do is just make sure that your images will conform and fit into the container size. The big caveat and the big takeaway here, right, is that it won't go to 120%, or it won't grow beyond its natural size. So it will shrink to fit in the container, but it will never grow to go in that container. We're going to see this in action a little bit as we go forward. But that's the standard. I put this on every single thing. Image, max width 100%, height auto. That means every image in my website is going to be responsive. Okay. And we'll never end up with something that looks like this, which is absolutely terrible. Image, I'm going to remove that and I'm going to go to 250. If you submit something that looks like that, my eyes are going to fall out of my head and I'm going to reduce your grade. I cannot stand looking at something like that. It is so easy to make it responsive. It's 2 lines of code, max width 100%, height of auto. Why are you setting the width and the height of it? Set the width of the container that you need, then tell the image to fit the width of the container. Structurally, that makes so much more sense, and you never end up with this. This is probably the most unprofessional thing you can do on a website going forward. Maybe not the most, but it's a pet peeve of mine. Jessica.
Hi, just kind of a weird question, and you kind of just covered it actually, but I guess I'll just ask again just to make sure I'm
Sure.
So if we were to set in the CSS the height to auto, max width 100%, it doesn't like squish the image like it just did in Photoshop. It doesn't like distort it that much. It will still look accurate.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
max width 100% and height, you don't even technically need the height auto, but it just allows you access to some other other browsers will look at that and say, well, what do you want me to do with the height? So I just say height auto, it'll automatically match the declared value, right? So yeah, absolutely. What'll happen is, there's a couple of scenarios. Sometimes people will just drop an image in using this kind of a scenario. Let's pretend, for example, looking at this, that div class image container did not have a width set. You just plop it on the page. If I drop a image in there, the image is going to automatically just want to be its inherent width. Let's just pretend it's 500 pixels. So it doesn't matter. Even if I have a width set inside of image container without, this is without any CSS. If I set image container to be a width, it doesn't matter. The image is an inline object. It's going to drop it on the page and it's going to be its inherent width until I tell it to be something different. That's always the case. So when I go in and I say, okay, let's tell the image to be, let's pretend we say, I want the image to be 500 pixels or whatever. That means we have a problem when we get responsive as I start messing with the width of the screen, or as I move from one device to the other, I have to manually change the image size every time. So the response to that is to say, why don't we just let the image flow and fit whatever the container is, which makes sense. We're already doing that with responsive code. Agreed? We're already building our websites to be responsive and relative units and things like that, so that they adapt and respond to the width of the browser or the device. So we might as well do the same with our images, so that they'll fit comfortably inside of those structures that we're building, those columns and those blocks. And by telling it to say max width 100% and height automatic, what it's going to do is it's going to become this kind of like when you can grab in the corner and you can kind of shrink or grow it, and it's going to automatically fit inside. Now you get that constrained look when you physically tell it, but you don't get the math right. Let's take a look. For example, if I change this to 500 wide and I click on the little button, sorry, the chain, it's automatically doing the math for me to keep the proportions correct. That's what's happening, right? But if I don't do that and I say 300 or 500, 600, my poor cat gets fatter and fatter and fatter until eventually we have this weird picture. Now, it just makes sense to say, just match them all up. Make sure that the maximum width is 100% and the height of auto, and that way it'll fit to whatever the container is, and we'll never have any issues with any of that stretching. It's a very simple fix. Did that answer your question a little bit, Jessica? Great.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. This is the reason I put a big stink on this, is because it is the easiest thing to do that 20% of you are never going to do. Right? 20% of you are going to ignore me right now, or you're not even here, and you're just going to ignore me, and you're going to do that. You're going to get stretch images, and I'm going to reduce the criteria for image by 50% or 75% because your image looks like grainy or looks terrible. Like I just said, please don't do. You're going to submit this to me, and you're going to suffer for it in grades, because it's so easy not to do that. Max width 100%, height auto. And as long as you've built structure already, then the image inside, all images, in fact, you don't have to give it a class. You can say all images will fit in their container. Too easy. Okay. I wanted to say that and just spend so much time on that because it's important to me. I think everybody here can agree this is terrible. And not even that, but we see, let's just look a little bit different. I'm just going to say probably something 600 or maybe 500, just a little bit. We've all seen websites or, terrible lost cat photos. Sorry about that. I shouldn't use lost cat as an example, but we've all seen, like come to the retirement party, whatever, where somebody just threw it on and squished it, right? Because they didn't think about image proportion. And it's pretty unprofessional. And in our world, it's very easy to fix. Max width auto, right? Be up to 100% of your maximum width. And then, max width 100% and height auto, automatically match that width. Okay, let's move on from this, but it's important that max width, we're going to play with it in a bit. So it's one thing to sit here and say, okay, well, we can adjust the sizing, right? We can do width and height set values, right? Image even has a width and height attributes on it. We try and stay away from those, right? Use CSS. But this is the proper responsive value, max with 100% height of auto. Now, sometimes, and I just talked to you guys about this, this is the crux of the class here, is that we have a huge image. So just because I'm telling it to be up to 100% of its size, so I could have a 10,000 pixel wide image, really massive. I just got it off my super new camera with all the bells and whistles, and I took a picture of a bird or something or whatever it is, and when I took it off my camera, it is massive. How many times, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten pictures like that. There's no need for that, right? So yes, it says max width 100%, which is going to make it appear to fit the container. If the container is only 500 pixels, then that massive image is going to fit. It's going to shrink to fit, but we still have to download a 10,000 pixel wide image of a bird or whatever, and that's going to be massive. Okay, and it gets even more confusing when we start adding in media queries. What about when we take we go down to a mobile? Then the 500 width pixel container now becomes a 400 pixel container. So now the picture is even smaller, but the file size is still huge. But except now we're looking at it on a device, so we're using up our data. But we just download a massive photo for no reason. So as designers, we have to think, what's the biggest that image is ever going to need to be? Okay, and we can adjust, we can display certain things using this, what we call source set. When we say display an image, it says image source. This is the image you're going to use. But with source set, we can say, let's get a set of images, a set of source images, and display them. And it allows us to display the most appropriate image based on a width of the browser. And it happens before we even load the CSS, because HTML always loads before the assets do. So HTML loads before the CSS does. Okay, that's a really important thing. So it means it's going to load quicker, first of all. If we have big giant images in our HTML, then it slows down the loading of our HTML, right? It slows things down. So we can let the browser choose the appropriate image. The downfall of this is that we have to create different sized images. So let's just take a look. So the source set attribute defines a list of images that we can choose from. Each image includes a related size or a pixel density. We set that. Okay, we're not going to look at pixel densities. Size and pixel density are really roughly the same. You just make a bigger image, right? And the browser will determine which image to use based on the viewport size and screen resolution. This is before we even see media queries or CSS at all. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, don't worry about the density thing. We're using 2 times, 3 times instead of values like 400 width, 800 width. That's fine. If you want 2 times density, just say 1600 pixels and we'll display at 800 width. It's very simple to do. But let's take a look. We have an image tag. Don't be confused. This is just one long string we just used, hit enter or whatever, just to put on a new line so we can see. It's just an image tag with a source and an alt, just like any other image tag. What we've also done here is we said source set. So here's the backup in case none of this works. We always specify a backup. Okay, that's the default. But source set, if the browser sees that, it's going to look at this first. It's going to say, okay, what is the width of the browser? Let's say the browser is 500 pixels wide. It's going to look at the browser and say, which one of these is most appropriate for 500 pixels without going over. Okay, 400 wide. Okay, well that's good. So, but the problem is 500 pixels is harder than larger than 400. 800 wide. Okay, well this might be right. It's going to look for the most appropriate image based on that size, and it's going to display that one. So in this case, if it was 500 wide, it would probably grab this one here and display it. And then we would use this in conjunction with our image code so that it can fit an 800 wide image, 800 pixel wide image into that 500 pixel box instead of a 1200 wide pixel or a 12,000 wide pixel or whatever it is you're trying to download. In this situation, what we're doing is creating different image sizes and letting the browser choose which, based on the width of the screen, letting it choose the most appropriate image so that the smallest image is always being displayed. Does that make sense, guys? Is there any questions about that? All we did here, everything's the same as this is just a normal image tag. We just added this source set tag so that the browser can say, okay, well, let's look at the size that we're looking at right now. We're going to see what we have available and choose the most appropriate image based on that.
So ideally, or those are all like the same images, just different sizes?
Absolutely. In this case, we'd have pictures of books on a shelf, but why would we use an 800? Let's just say that the container right now at whatever browser width we are is set to be, I don't know, 400 pixels or something. Why would we use an image that's twice as big as we need when we can just set a group of images and just have one that's resized smaller? Right? I would just create different size images. And then, so it was very simple to apply. Yeah.
So in this case there, we like in our images folder, we would have all three of those?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And here's a nice thing about this too, guys. Once you learn how to use this and you do like I do, once you get a little more proficient in web design, you're probably going to end up using, your WordPress to design. And when you use WordPress, what it does when you upload an image, it keeps the first image, so let's say 12,000 pixels, and then it automatically creates 3 smaller images: a thumbnail, a small one, right? It creates a medium-sized, and it creates a large size. And we can define what those values are within WordPress. But once we know that, it becomes really easy to create themes that are fully responsive based on the power of the tool already. So this is something that going forward in a content management system too, and into the real world working force becomes really easy to apply because WordPress handles it anyway. We had a question, source set, is it for HTML or CSS? This is all happening in the HTML. The idea of this is that what we're doing is we're avoiding doing any changes of the images before the CSS is even applied, because HTML will always fully load before the CSS is applied, right? So in this case, we're loading the most appropriate image into the actual HTML before we have to even do anything with it. And that way, if the screen needs a 400 one, then we're loading the 400 instead of the 1200. We're already saving space and time and bandwidth and downloads, right? It's super handy. And look how easy it is to use. Don't get mystified about it. It's very easy to use. Now, since we're on the topic of doing this, so before I move forward, how do we feel about that? Does that make sense to you guys? Because now's the time, right? If somebody doesn't understand it, just ask, and probably someone else is thinking the same thing. We can help clarify here as a group, right? Everyone gets this idea? It's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I'm good for questions. Thank you, bro.
Yeah, no problem. I think everyone has it here. Okay, so now that we're talking about this, we say that's really great, but we can move it on to another different idea. Now, we say sizes here. We're just talking about dimensional sizes of the image. Okay, so different dimensions is probably a better way to put it than sizes. So different dimensions of the image that are going to best match the width of the browser's at. Okay. There's a few little caveats that we'll explore when we actually get into doing the exercise, because some of you might be astute enough to realize that there's a caveat to this. How does it know if we're loading the HTML first and we grab the browser and I do that with it? How does it know now? Does it switch on the fly? It really can't do that. So there's a little something that'll happen with that. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, let's just I can't look at that. My OCD makes me crazy with it. Okay, there we go. Close enough. Now, let's just take another situation with this. Let's talk about the size, not the dimensional size, but there's another actual attribute called sizes actually. Okay. And it defines the size of the image at each viewport size. So essentially, we're actually even telling it to fit into a certain block on the screen or a certain size on the screen, or into a layout. This is more of a layout tool, right? So not just saying here's the most appropriate image, but here's the most appropriate image to fit into the layout. So if we look at even just the green here we have on the left, the title bar, it's a SRC set or source set, and the white part on the right, this is a 2-column layout, right? This one's, we'll say 30 or 33%, maybe whatever it might be. We'll say 33%. And then we have this one over here, 66% on the white area. Let's just pretend. So what we can, if we take this about 800 pixels, that's great. It's 800 pixels. By default, it wants to fit 100% of the screen. But maybe I want to take that image and fit it at different breakpoints to automatically change. Like, for example, we want to say, just like we did with this max width, we want to be certain height. We can add that right into the HTML. So again, not only manipulating the correct image file to load, but also the correct dimensional size of that image. Do you guys know what I mean? Like, we want to fit into this 33% over here, so we can do that. So that's what sizes allows it to do. It allows us to put basically a media query built into the HTML. Okay, so we've already learned that this is not difficult to do, the source set. Okay, sizes is not difficult, but it's just adding another layer. So we can't use percent or anything like that. What we can use is absolute fixed units like pixels or things like that, or more appropriately, VW. Now, VW and VH, you guys probably haven't seen before. Does anybody know what that stands for? Please don't say Volkswagen. Does anybody know what the VW unit stands for in web design?
I don't.
Viewport width.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
what I was saying.
Yeah, you guys got it. Viewport width.
Solid, everyone.
Yeah, everyone's on it, and that's great. The last group wasn't sure about that, so that's that's great that you guys know that. So viewport width. So what it's saying is it detected the viewport width and display it. Now, this doesn't necessarily in HTML won't change on the fly, but it's basically like saying width 100%, but it doesn't take into account the box model. So that's kind of nice. It just says how big is the viewport. So the viewport is the visual area in the screen. Okay, so in my case, I can see I've got a little left and right. So it's basically from this edge on the left over to this edge on the right without the browser Chrome. The browser Chrome is the scroll bar, that's what we call, and this stuff on the top, that's called the browser Chrome. But the without any of that, this is that's the viewport width, and the same with the height. It's just the visual area. Okay, so VW stands for that. So what we can do is, and that's probably the best one to use. Okay, by default, if we don't specify a sizes attribute, then it's going to assume 100 VW. So it's going to say whatever size of image you've just chosen to put in, just be up to the biggest size, which is like, we're going to assume it's just going to fit the whole screen. Okay, it's not going to stretch it or anything. It's just going to say just be up to 100 VW, 100% viewport width. Okay, remember, we haven't done any CSS yet, so we don't have anything responsive. Okay, just remember that at this point, we haven't even touched any CSS. All we've done is said, look at the size of the screen, select the most appropriate image. No problem. With sizes, what we can do is we can add another attribute in here, and we can say, at the minimum width of 1024 pixels, we want that image to fit into 25% VW. So 25 VW means 25% of the viewport width. Okay, so it's just going to allow it to fit into your layout more comfortably, right? Then when we hit a minimum width of 800 pixels, we're going to say 50% of our viewport width, and then 100 viewport width here, width there's no media query. So think about what we're doing here. Mobile first, progressive enhancement, right? When we're at 100 viewport width, we're very small, right? Or sorry, when there's no media query, we want it to take up as much space as possible because we're trying to go left to right and make big mobile style layouts, which is just, if you look at your phone, right, the image usually goes all the way across because it's just a small width. So by default, 100 VW. And then what we're also saying is that minimum width of 800 pixels, which is maybe say tablet sized. Again, we don't want to have little tiny columns like 25% images going across. We just want to have one or two, so 50%. So the one image will go, it'll only appear 50%. We're going to see this by in the example. So it might only be 50%. And then once we get to desktop size, 1024, this is by just arbitrary numbers, right? You can choose anything you want. And in that case, it's going to be 25. So now we can go 4 in a row, which makes a lot more sense on a desktop than it does on a mobile. So again, we're just progressively enhancing. We're allowing the correct image to fit comfortably into our layout at a certain size without loading. There's no CSS here. This is an HTML tag. These are attributes of that HTML tag. We're saying, let's select the most appropriate image for that size, right? And let's select let it fit comfortably into a certain layout. This isn't we don't have to do this, right? It's just a layout tool for us to help out. If we mix source set with our responsive image code max with 100%, it'll do essentially the same thing, right? This is something, you know, when we see it in action, it'll help out a little better. But can you kind of imagine how that's going to work?
Yeah.
For example, let's imagine we were using grid and we said, I want to have 2 columns, one left, one right. One column's me like this is going to say, welcome to my website. And on the right-hand side, it says, there's a picture of a boat or something. Okay. At mobile, probably want to have welcome, or the picture of the boat on the top. And then in the bottom, it says, welcome to the website. Right. So this picture on the right-hand side would be on top at 100% width. And then the green part will be on the bottom at 100% width. Perfect. Mobile, we're set. And then we say, okay, well, once we get to tablets, we want to move them left to right. So we would say, okay, well, at 800 pixels, we want that image to fit at 50% of the viewport width. So we can tell it to fit comfortably inside of a grid, you know, at whatever breakpoints we need. These numbers are all arbitrary. You can choose whatever fits your layout, but we're going to see it in action. Okay, so it's all about efficiency. Size is just, it's more of a layout tool than anything else. Source set is the big one. Okay, there's one more final thing, and we'll take a break after this, but I want to talk to you guys about the picture element. And I want to show you an example. Here's a website that I built, DuraBuild. Okay, now take a look at the logo specifically. Have I ever showed you guys this website before?
No, you haven't.
Okay, so here's a website for a construction company in Ottawa. I built this. I think they're doing a redesign now, but whatever. Take a look at this logo at the top. In the mobile size, I wanted it to fit on top of this image at the back, and I wanted so I had to make it, you know, and it's big. It's a set size, and so because it's fitting on this image, I had to have a white text in the DuraBuild. Now, okay, we can all see that. Now, the thing is that when I went to at mobile size, I wanted it to be different. I wanted to have a white bar along the top with that little hamburger menu. I can click it and it'll slide. But because it's a white bar, I couldn't have white text. So let's just see what that looks like. This is the mobile size. I'm going to kitty cat here. Okay, this is the mobile size, and it allowed me to do something like this. But notice it's a smaller image, right? It's clearly a smaller image, and it's got black text. Now, as I go bigger, it's a larger image with white text. Right? How did I do that? It's not a background image. I can clearly grab it and move it around. So it's clearly an HTML object on the page. Right? If you go to something like this, for example, notice I can't drag these images around because it's either a background or an icon. I can't drag the picture of the guy in the background, but if I can click and drag this, that has a little X with a line or a circle with a bar through it. It just means that it's an actual image on the page. So it is an actual image. But I used this idea of a picture tag. Okay, and the picture tag allows me to say, I can use it along with source and source set sizes, and I can say, well, I can change the actual image. And this becomes really handy when we're talking about aspect ratios. Okay, and a great example of that might be if I wanted to have an image go from being a rectangle to being a square, or if I wanted to change from one type of image to another. And we just seen that app. That's exactly what I'm using here. If I right click and I use the inspect tool, we can see over here, I'm using the picture tag with the source set, and I'm just changing, and I've got different media widths and sizes. Okay, and that's all I'm doing here. It's kind of the standard. So the picture element, okay, along with the source tag, it's a different type of idea. This encompasses your whole image tag and then some. I'm not gonna go down that too far down the rabbit hole with this. I just want to be exposed to it. But the picture element, it's used to display different types of images, not just different sizes, but we can actually change the image itself. Okay, and the picture element can be used to provide different image formats or different aspect ratios, as we've just seen by an example. And we can actually use a new attribute in the picture tag called media. Okay, and we apply it to the source tag, and it will accept media queries in the HTML themselves. And of course, we always have to include the image tag and the alt tag inside the picture element. Let's see that in action. So in this case, the image tag down here is just a standard image tag. Again, we're by the books, 800, whatever. And because we're going to be switching between two different sets of images, because we want to have different aspect ratios. Let me just break this down first. The idea is that the first set of images are rectangular. Okay, and the second set are square. So instead of having different, it could be that this is the small one with the white text and this is the big one with the black text, whatever it might be. They're just different ways of tackling this. But let's look at this in break it down. The picture is a placeholder. It says there's a picture in here. That's all that is. By default, without any of this, without these source set tags, it's going to say, okay, if none of this works, we always have to have our backup. It says image source equals and the alt equals. Okay, so far you guys are with me. Okay, we just take the image tag, which is just the backup, before we even add anything else. So then we can extend it, right? And we say, okay, all of these two different sources of sets of images. The first set is saying books 400, books 800, just like we just covered. And we add this media tag, which says once we hit a maximum width of 960, everything's going to be rectangular, which is perfect for example, mobile. When everything's at the smallest width, right? We want it to be 100% of the width across. So basically, once we hit a maximum width of 960, only at the smallest size. And then it's going to choose the most appropriate image. By default, the size is always VW100, so it's going to try and fit the whole screen. Great, no problem. It's already choosing the most appropriate image. It'll fit 100% of our screen up to 960 pixels. That gives us that nice full width layout, okay, for image. Then we add another set of images. And at this one, we say, once we hit the minimum width of 961, okay, max width is a top ceiling. Once we go past that, once we hit the minimum of 961, which is 1 pixel past the max width, then what we're going to do is we want to break it into 2 columns. So it's only going to take up 50% of the viewport width, and it's going to become a square instead of a big long rectangle. Can you visualize what I'm trying to get at? Maybe a little bit. This is the same kind of idea we're going to apply to the in-class exercise. I just wanted you to see it first. Okay. And now again, guys, notice that this is all HTML. We haven't done anything in the CSS. So this will, number one, it's going to choose not only the most appropriate image, but the most appropriate type of image that fits into your layout. It's going to do it at the right media query. It's going to maintain the alt tag, which is going to keep the accessibility right, and it's going to keep everyone happy because it's going to load quickly, smoothly, and efficiently. Now, this is heavy duty. You don't often see this in production world. People don't use this a lot because you have to create multiple images. But if you want to do things right and you want to really go a step beyond and make your page load quickly, and this is the right way to do it. And then also, like I said, I don't design websites unless it's WordPress. I do everything in WordPress. If my client doesn't want WordPress, then I tell them to find a new designer. It allows me to charge a little more money, and it allows me to keep flexing my skills, so I'm not just doing garbage work all the time. So I like that. And WordPress by default will download images. It just does that, right? If I was to load WordPress right now, I could show you in the settings where it says what are the sizes of the images you want us to create for you. So it creates a small, medium, and a large, as well as uploading the original every time you upload an image to the media folder. So knowing that, this becomes easy to create themes. You can create beautiful, responsive, quick loading websites automatically, because all it does really is add a -sm, -md, and -lg after the image name. That's sorry, I'm going too far down the rabbit hole, guys. I'm sorry. This is something you don't see applied very often, but you can. Now we're gonna do a hybrid of just the first version with the sizes and a mix of adding in the breakpoint. I'm going to give you guys a chance, or the responsive CSS. We'll see that in action. Okay, so we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to do the in-class exercise. Okay, I'll run a timer for 15 minutes, and then we'll actually take all this crap of me talking, and we're going to apply it in a practical way. All right. Before I do that, are there any questions about anything we've talked about so far? Because I'm done the lecture portion. So if there's any questions about the theory of what I'm talking about, now's a great time to bring that up before we take a break. Rob.
I'm going back a bit here, but I'm kind of confused about like how to, looking at the SVG images, how to just like input them directly into the HTML. Is there any way we can like go over that maybe?
Sure.
I started the EO2 and I'm really struggling with the SVG images.
Okay, let's go find an SVG. Oh man. Okay, can I get just 1 second, guys? Okay, sorry, I apologize. I'm just getting a call from my dentist.
Oh yeah.
Guys, I am so sorry about that. I'm trying to book a time with my dentist, so anyway. I'm really sorry about having to do that in the middle of class. Okay. So we were talking before about going back to SVG. So I'm going to download an SVG. I'm going to do this right now. We'll take a break. We'll still take our 15-minute break, no problem. But if you guys can bear with me, let's just do this up. I'm going to find an SVG to download. Just for demonstration purposes, I haven't vetted this site. I don't know what it's like or anything. But I just want to just grab an SVG. I don't like downloading from places like that. It freaks me out a little bit. But the idea is, if I opened up this image in Photoshop, okay, which I'm going to try and do right here. Okay, open this up. Yeah, okay, well, that's good. Let's see if I can get it in, if I can drag it right in. Bear with me, guys. Let's see if I can drag it right in. Okay, I got to save it. Of course I do. Okay, well, that's fine. Let's continue. Let's do it. Let's go to our downloads and we'll grab the image here and we'll pop it right in here. Okay, now here I've got this image. That's great. Now, the nice thing about this image is that not only can I view it here like this, I can also open up the SVG inside of my inside of this. So let me just open this file and see. Same thing. Go to my documents, downloads, and open the file up, and we can see my SVG file that I've just looked at over here, which is an image, is actually a bunch of code. In fact, a lot of code. It's mathematical. Right? Can everyone see that okay?
Yep, for sure.
Okay. So I bet you didn't know that, right? But look at this. It kind of looks like HTML, right? A little bit like it's got the same structure, but we're just, adding some stuff to it. Now, if I wanted to add this in, I could just say copy and paste it in. Okay, I could do that because it's just code. Okay, why would I want to do that? Well, maybe what I want to do is I make these little leaves kind of twisting and turning a bit. So I could mix this with CSS and HTML, or CSS and JavaScript, and I could move like style equals. Look at this. It's just styles. I could change the colors at different times using animation stuff we're going to learn in the coming weeks. Right, I can move some of these things around using and adjust the position of them, the coordinates of it on the screen. So we can do that. So if we wanted to add this in, it's just code. This is not the most efficient way. Adding the SVG as just an image source equals whatever is the easiest way. But you could, if it was just something really simple, like a lot of times for a circle or something, a square or whatever, you could just grab all the code as code and just drop it on your HTML page. Crazy, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but this of course is complicated. So you can see the limitations of doing that. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So like you would basically want to, like you wouldn't want to use the image tag for an SVG if you were wanting to animate it or something like that, but otherwise, like typically you would want to just use the image tag.
What I'll do is that's a great question. What I'll do is I will put a link on with a tutorial on how to add SVG files in different ways, and that way you guys can have all the best information going forward on that, because there's some different things for best practices. So it's a good question, but it involves it's better to have more information than less. So I'll post a link for you guys with that information. That way you can refer back. Is that good?
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Because it's a valuable point. Like, when do I use that? When do I? And I know a lot of people just prefer to use SVG, so I get it's okay.
Cool.
Okay, someone asked a question. What's a good practice for image resolution for web? Not 72. 72 DPI is the standard for web. So if you're going to build an image or create any image that you grab, make sure it's at 72 DPI. If you grab something off your camera, it's going to by default be 300. That's too many DPIs. That's just that right away.
Michelle, sorry to cut you off, but thanks for Michelle drilled this into our head big time too, the 72. So it's good. It's good to know that Google won't like
that's the 72 DPI is the standard. There's all kinds of other whatever. It's just 72 is just the standard. You can really do whatever your needs are. 72. Another question is, do we always have the source set at 400, 800, and 1200? That's a great question. Are those numbers can change depending on the image size? That's a great question. It really, again, just like anything with any sizing or media queries, it really depends on what design you have. If your breakpoint is set at a certain size, or if you need this image to change at a certain size, you can adjust these to be whatever you want to. These are just arbitrary image sizes we chose. But yeah, you can make them fit them to whatever you want to. The only caveat that I have is that if you're going to make an image at, like, the naming doesn't even matter, but if you're going to have an image that's 400 pixels wide and it says 400W, then make sure that they match. Like, I wouldn't make one 360, another one 400. That's all, right? Make sure that they match up. That way it's good. And just putting the number on it really helps. Some people use TN, SM, MD for like thumbnail, small, medium, large. It just makes sense to me for this type of thing to put numeric values in there so I know. Oh, and also aspect ratios, books, SQ 400. If it's transparent, I add a -TR at the end. I always just use little naming conventions like that. But the numbers are all arbitrary. You can make it whatever works for you. It used to be we would design for specific devices. Now we just design for our design, or we code to match our design. And that means the numbers can be fluid based on your needs. Does that answer your question, Christine? Awesome. You're welcome, one. Okay, so we're going to take a 15-minute break. Even though we went long, I still owe you guys a 15-minute break. We're going to come back and we're going to do this in a practical sense. We're going to have it done. You're going to submit it. You're going to get all the marks. And then I'm going to send you guys on your way. Okay, so let's do that 15-minute timer. I also could use a coffee. Again, I'm really sorry about that break from my dentist, guys. I'm having emergencies I need to deal with. So take a 15-minute break and I'll call them back and you guys can do with having a grab coffee. Thanks. All right, guys, we're back. All right, let me set up here. Perfect. Okay. This little girl, there she goes. Okay. All right. So we're going to move forward now. We've talked about a couple of different things, and we're going to move into the picture this, which is the exercise that we're doing today. You can find that under content as well in Brightspace under week 5, because we're already there. Unbelievable. For picture this, just another extra for you guys as well. There is a link here on in Brightspace under week 5 called Responsive Images Tutorial. And it is, if you find that you didn't like my style, or you need some more information, or you want just more in depth about what does we mean by sizes attribute, or can break down source set, it talks a lot about each one of these tags in just in detail, right? And some of it's very straightforward. So feel free to have a look at that. It's right inside of week 5 on Brightspace, called Responsive Images Tutorial. Really useful. So if you need some more information, I just found it helpful when I found it, so I just posted it for here for you guys. I will post something with the SVGs, so just bear with me on that. I teach from 8 to 4 today, so it'll be later, but I will post something. Okay, so pardon me. So we have the picture of this assignment. That's going to take us right over here to the IMDAC anyway. Okay, so let's just we'll leave that open for now. Okay, let's take a look at what we have here. This is an exercise that we're going to do in class. We're going to do that together today. So there's a couple of things we're going to accomplish here. We're going to look at the picture, the source set, and the sizes. Not so much picture. I'm going to leave that to your discretion if you're feeling you want to do it. As long as we have the source set tag and the sizes, I'm happy with those today. I want to show you a couple of different ways of doing things to just mix everything up, kind of what we call just having fallbacks in place. So, it's just best practices. So the following requirements must be met in order to complete the assessments successfully. We're going to do this together. We're going to start by downloading the picture of this starter files. I'm going to do it right now. Okay, download the picture of this starter files. And inside the zip folder, you're going to find index.html file, style.css folder, and an images folder containing a single image. We're going to use the image table below to choose a set of images that works appropriately for us. Using Photoshop, or you can use Derive. That's an online tool, okay, to create multiple image sizes provided. And then we're going to create the HTML and CSS to make a responsive image site. Okay, that's all it is. Let's see what that's going to look like. So at our default smallest, so basically less than 960 pixels, we're going to have like this. It's going to be just like a mobile site, right? It's going to be everything in column layout, or in one single column of layout. Then as we go beyond 960 pixels, we're going to see something like this. It's going to go left and right. We're using grid to approach that. So let's just set up our workspace and then take a look at what the code looks like. So you guys are going to want to follow along with me. And because we're going to push this slide just so we're on the same page. The submission for this is going to be pushed to the GitHub paging site. I have posted an announcement going through again how to push, what the link looks like, how to access the link and submit it properly. Again, remember, don't forget, guys, when you get your link, you're going to be getting it from the URL bar, not by copying and pasting from the HTML on the website for the github.com. But you're going to submit the project with just a single link of your live website. Okay, once you submit it, you're not going to make any changes to it, and you're not going to push after the due date. Otherwise, it'll be considered late, and that'll come with a 0, right? So just keep that in mind. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to set us up for that now. Technically, at the end of this hour or thereabouts, we should all be submitted. Everyone who's here should have a submitted project. It will be fine. Okay. If not, it's okay until the end of the day. If we encounter any issues, I can always push on the boss, guys. I can push some due dates if we need to. It's not a problem. No stress. Okay, so let's set this up. I'm going to start by grabbing my if I can find it on my desktops. Oh my goodness, I have too many files. 1 second. Where did I put? Oh, it's right there. Okay. Huh. Okay, so there's my my containing folder that has my my sync for my GitHub, right? Everyone know what I'm talking about? Somewhere on your computer, you have a file called username.github.io where all your GitHub stuff is. Okay, that's where I'm going to put this. So I'm going to open up the starter file, okay, which is right here. Download the picture of this starter files. Okay, I'm going to download that and I'm going to extract it into here. Okay, into more of my kingsbr.github.io. So let's set that up now. I'm going to extract it directly into there. Okay, and I can just rename it picture dash this. Remember, you never put spaces or capitals in this name. This is going to be part of the URL. It's going to be kingsbr or username.github.io/picture this. That's how you're going to access my website. I've never accessed a website that has a space or a capital in it, right? So we never use, we learned this in week 1 of responsive web design, right? No capitals, no spaces. Otherwise, it'll be username.github.io/picture%20 this, right? It doesn't, that's not good. So never any spaces or caps. Okay. All I did was I downloaded the starter. I put it inside my local GitHub file. Okay. If anybody's confused, let me know if I'm moving too quick or if that doesn't make sense, right? And I just renamed it to match the assignment. Picture this. Okay. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to grab the containing folder, not the kingsbr.github.io, but the folder above that. And I'm going to drop it inside of Visual Studio Code so that we have a nice, I can see the structure, right? Everybody with me? Let's see what I have. What changes do I have here? Okay. All the stuff that I just brought in. Now, this is just a standard workflow going forward. Okay. So we should now see, we should have downloaded and extracted it, renamed it inside of the correct folder. And then I grabbed the containing folder, which is the parent folder with my username. We could see the structure, something like this. Okay. And, I can see that there's a green, so some untracked stuff in here. I'm just going to open this up. I can see untracked, the image folder untracked. Okay, so that's all ready to go. And now I'll take a look and see what we have. So the submission is just the submission file. Oh, yeah, it's not, I can delete that. That's good. That change as well. Okay. Now what do we have here? The Flexbox, or sorry, picture this assignment. We can see there's a couple of things in here. There's a readme.md, just so we're on the same page. I'm just going to bring it up now. MD is not, this is not arbitrary. And this is important because later on, you're going to see readme.md. And I've had people submit all kinds of things when really what I'm asking for is readme.md. .md is it's a file extension, just like .html, .css, .jpeg. It stands for Markdown. That's why this looks like it does. This is a level 1 heading, it's a level 2 heading, etc. Right? This means that there's a link here. That's the title of the link. That's where the link is going to go to. Okay, it's called Markdown, and it's recognized as by GitHub. Okay, so if I ever ask you for readme.md or you see that, it just means it's a file that's recognizable by GitHub. So to make sure it looks just like that, just an FYI going forward, that's what that is. And that's just so you can look at this and you can see all the information that's exactly on GitHub or on the IMDAC. Okay, because this is all based on GitHub. Okay, so moving forward, if we look at the instructions, it says we're going to need multiple images, right? We know that going forward, that's what we're trying to accomplish here. Sorry, in the slides, right? Something like this, we're going to need multiple images. So I'm going to use the chart to first things first. I'm going to open up Photoshop. So go ahead and open your Photoshop. Mine's already up. But open up your Photoshop, and we're going to take the image that we just downloaded. That's in our here it is. Picture this. Images. Here's the museum picture, right? But it's much bigger than, right? It's 5,000 pixels wide or something. And we're going to open that up inside of Photoshop. So let's do that. File, open. I'm going to go find it. For me, it's on my desktop. You'll have to find it in your own situation. There it is. Picture this. Images there. Museum. I'm going to give everyone a second to find it. It's going to look like this. It's going to be wherever you downloaded it. Okay, so just open it up like this, so it's ready to go. I'll give you a couple more minutes to get that done. Okay, are we good? Is anybody still having trouble finding finding the museum picture? We're all good.
I'm good if everyone else is good.
Yeah, we got no other hands up or anything. It looks like everyone's good to go. Okay, all right. So we got it open. If anybody's having trouble, remember this is all recorded. We can always go back, and I'll try and hit everything with it. So we want to create multiple versions of this file. Okay, I'm going to create several different just so we can see it in action. And we can use this chart to do that. So I'm going to create probably 320, 480, 720, 960. I'm okay with just a standard 1 times. I'm not worrying about pixel densities. I'm just going to use this just to create a standard whatever. Now, these again are arbitrary numbers. We've just chosen some numbers. Okay, so I'm going to use that. But with that said, and I'm not going to worry about the square portion. We'll just look at different versions of that going forward here. But if you want to do it, you can later. That's no problem. Before I do any of that, let's just take a look at what what we have for HTML and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to go to my index. I'm going to open that up and my style sheet. Okay, so I've got a couple of things open here. So starting with my style sheet, we've just got some standard stuff. If we look in the header, we're using grid. Okay, and the grid template by default is 1FR because there's no style sheet, no media query yet. So it just means 1FR out of 1FR, which is the grid is going to be 100% wide column, right? No problem. And then a couple of other little goodies. There's an image here. We're going to mess with that a little bit later. And then we have a media query that basically just changes the grid, right? We already have display grid set and other line items. So all we have to do is just say the grid template column is going to change. We're going to have 2 1FR. So 1FR, 1FR, and that's what we're going to get this appearance of going from mobile, which is 1FR, one out of 100%, to 1FR and 1FR, which is 2 1FRs, one, right? Like 2 of these. This is going to create 2 fractions of a grid. So 1 out of 2 and 2 out of 2. And that'll give us this 50%, 50%, right? That's all we're doing with that. So we're going from a single mobile type layout to after 960 pixels, we're going to have a column type layout. Okay, can everyone kind of understand? Everyone sees what we're doing there? Just so we're on the same page. Just simple grid. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at the HTML. In this HTML, we've got a header that has that's the grid set on it, and we've got the div and image. Those are the 2 children, div and image. So basically, the source order is going to say at mobile, we're going to have this nice green background. It's going to say, picture this, my really cool blog. Just like that. And then the next child inside of the grid is going to be, there's the div, which is the first child, and the header has a grid on it. The next one's going to be the image. Okay, that there's a bigger breakpoints. We're just going to get them into two different columns, 50%, 50%. Easy, or 50% of viewport width, 50% of viewport width. That's what we're accomplishing here. So let's go ahead and start by setting up our images. Now, I've already chosen the images I'm going to go with. The image sizes 320, 480, 720, and 960. So let's set that up. Now, I'm not worrying about square or anything right now. Let's just go open our image. I'm going to say image size. Now, I don't want to do canvas size. There's a difference between these two. If I say canvas size, look what's going to happen. Don't follow along. I'm just giving you a best practice. I'm going to change this to pixels. I'm going to say 500 pixels by, I don't know, whatever it's going to be. Now, watch what happens when I do that. It's going to cut the image. Okay, we don't want that. It's going to crop the image. What we're looking for is image size. We want to change. So just to be clear, canvas size is like artboard. It's going to change the visible area of the artboard, whereas image size will actually change the dimension. Now we see a couple of things. I want to make sure the chain is selected so that when I make a change to width, it'll match the height appropriately. So the chain should be selected. We can see it lined up, and it'll match the 2. I also want to set the resolution down to 72 dpi. 72 instead of 300. And I'm just going to start working my way back through from right now, we're at 1,313. The first size I want to hit is 960. Great. Okay, now we should be able to scroll. We can see the whole thing because we're using image size, not canvas size. So 960 by 540 at 72 dpi for resolution, 72 pixels per inch. You guys with me? I'll hit OK. And now it shrinks. Now I can set my zoom to 100% now. There we go. So that's our 960. I'm going to file. I'm going to use the export and save for web. Okay, you guys should have that as well. File, export, save for web. And I want to do that because I want to show you guys a couple things, right? save for web legacy. And now I can see the original is 1.48 megabytes. We optimize it, we're down to 160. So almost 100% reduction. Remember, like it's an insane amount, right? So
Google loves us. Google loves us.
Yeah, right. This will be a great thing. So we're going to shrink this down at 2 megabytes per second. It's going to be 2 seconds to download this image. Okay. And we want to just leave it high. We're fine with that. Everything else is fine. Okay. So we're going to optimize that. And so I'm going to save that, and I'm going to save it inside of the folder I got it from. Picture this. Images, we could see the original, and I'm going to change it and save it as museum-960, because that's what it is, 960 pixels, right? We set it up to be 960 pixels when we resized it at 72 DPI. So I'm going to say museum-960 JPEG. I'm going to save it in the original folder. Easy. Let's continue the same process down, and we'll do 720 image size. We're all set except for the width. So I'll say 720 for width. And I say save or okay, it shrinks it. And now I can export, save for web, same thing. And this one, 720, I double check, we're good. The file size is down by 20 kilobytes. I'm going to save it, and I can follow the same suit, museum-720. Saved in the same spot. Keep going down. Image size. This one we're looking at is 480. And again, all our resolution, everything is good. Because we clicked the little box with the chain in it, when I make a change, you notice the height changes to match. So that's what we're constraining the proportions. So that's good. It shrinks it. It's great. Export. So file, export, save for web. And this one is 480. So I'm going to save it as museum-480.jpg. And the last one I'm going to do is 320. I'll just finish this one up, and I'll answer your question for you there, Jessica. So I'm going to set this up 320, shrinks it, file, export, save for web. And I just make sure that the image is right size. And then I'm just renaming it museum-320. Okay. Jessica, do you have a question?
Yeah, because of all the programs I have open, my computer is going really slow.
Mine too.
Yeah, so I'm still working on the first image. And when I went to resize it, it actually expanded it for some reason. And it says my image size is 4.34 gigabytes. And I'm not quite sure what I did wrong, and you're just moving so fast that I'm just like stuck on the first one.
Yeah, if I'm moving fast, by all means, tell me to slow down. I have no problem with that, guys. Okay, so I appreciate you letting me know. Let's take a step back and get that done. So first off, we'll start off saying, if you have anything open that doesn't need to be open, we're doing image manipulation at a small scale. So we should close anything that doesn't need to be open just for now. That's one thing. Secondly, so when we grab this image, the original, I'm going to open it up. I'm done with these guys here. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to open that image again. There it is. Matter of fact. Okay. Now there's a few things I'm going to notice right away. Down at the bottom, I can see this image is 48.2 megabytes. So it's a huge image right away. I can also see 16.67%. For me, it automatically shrinks the image visually. It's not changing the actual dimension of the image. It's just shrinking visually in the screen, so it'll fit my available viewable space inside of Photoshop. That's all that's happening. If I change that to 25%, this is just the zoom in the software. So I'm just zooming in and out. If I change it to 100%, it's going to look massive, but you notice the document size is still pretty big, right? Still pretty standard stuff. Okay, so we've got this open now. So everyone, you guys with me so far? We're understanding what's happening here, the 16%. This doesn't actually change the image size, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I don't want to change the canvas size. I do not want to do that. That's too big. So I'm going to go here to image size. And I think what happened is maybe we forgot to change the resolution. Okay, the big thing is the resolution. So we want to downscale. We're actually taking this full-size image and downscaling it. Make sure that the little chain is selected. Okay, because if it's not selected, what's going to happen is it's going to allow me to change the width and the height separate of each other. And I don't want to do that. I want them to change at the same pace, that if I make the width 10 pixels smaller, then the height will be a matching amount smaller, so it doesn't get all out of proportion and weird looking. The chain will lock those two in step together. Okay, your image size is different.
Yeah, at the very top where it says image size, on yours it says 48.2 M.
Yep.
And on my screen it says 4.36 G.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's really big. Okay.
Yeah,
well, we can
I
still,
don't know why.
we should still be able to fix that. Let's just shrink it. So make sure the chain is selected. How many pixels does it say for width?
Right now it says 100.
Okay. Did you change it to pixels?
Oh, that could be my issue. Pixels, percent, perfect.
Okay. And fit to, just change it to original size for now.
Okay.
Okay. And how many pixels does it say for width?
52,531.
I don't know how it got so big. That's crazy. Okay.
Bizarro world. We're in bizarro world.
Yeah, it's pretty big. So, okay, with width, so we're going to shrink it anyway. So yours, it may take a while to process it to make it smaller, but since we've selected the chain and everything, let's drop it down for the first instance. The first one we want is 960. If the chain is selected, it should say 960 by 540. Sorry about that. I'll have to change the resolution down to first. What's your resolution saying?
I changed it to 72. It was originally at 300, but then I changed it to 72.
Yeah, so
Mine's looking a little more accurate.
Yeah, we want to change it down to 72 and then set the width to 960, right? So the resolution to 72 and then set the width to 960. Okay, everything else should be the same. Now, once you get to this stage, we can see the dimensions are going to be 960 by 540. I can hit OK. It's going to shrink it down. It may take longer for you because it has a little more work to do, but it's going to shrink it down. And then I can actually zoom in more if I want to. I do. I'm going to change it down the bottom left to 100%, and I can see this is the actual size 100% that it's going to appear, and I'm going to have to work with. Okay. Let me know when yours is working is to a level that works for you.
All right, everything looks good. It's just preparing to build a preview, and it's just taking its sweet time. So you can keep going.
No, that's okay. I want to make sure we're on the same page, because that's the whole thing, right? Once you get that step done, it's just a matter of going back to, we can save this one, and then it's a matter of going back to image size. So I want to make sure we're on the same page. So I'll give you a second to get the preview done. It's better that we're all on the same page here, because if one person is having an issue, let's just do this as a group, and we can stay together as a group. Since we're over here, what's the text layer? Someone asked. The text layer over here. Not too sure what this text layer is. If I turn it on and off, I can see there is none. So I probably accidentally clicked inside of here, and then maybe whatever. There is no text layer. I can literally just delete that. Don't need that. I think I just clicked inside by accident and added something, and I just yeah. Is still preparing your preview?
Yep.
That's a big file. I'm not sure why. I might consider, you might almost want to consider going back and re-downloading, because I don't know what happened, but the image just isn't that big. So I'm not sure why, like the actual download, I've downloaded it twice in 2 days now, and the standard image is 4.35 megabytes. So if it's that big, I don't know why it would have done that.
I set I realized I had it set to %. So, I mean, maybe that did something.
Yeah,
but
960% would definitely do it. So
yeah,
if I was to grow this,
we're good.
if I was to grow this up to 960%, then the image gets, even then it's only 100. That's huge. But is it shrunk now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's good.
So
Thank
once we no problem at all. Once we get the image down to the size we want to, I just need to rename it appropriately. So I'm going to go over here to File, and I could say Save As, but the nice thing about Photoshop is that if we use the export tool, it's going to allow us to, it's going to shrink it down and give us an optimized image size. So I like the Save for Web tool because I am legacy. I'm old school, guys. So, and this already handles a lot of that for us. So I'm going to Save for Web. And we can already see it's, there it is. But the difference is from 1.48 megabytes down to 160 kilobytes. That's pretty amazing. That's an amazing drop, right? So that's a big amount. Okay,
I
so
love that for some reason. Sorry, side note. I love that we can make it so much smaller with it. I find it fascinating. Anyways,
yeah. No, and this is the important thing. I mean, think of that. The difference is it looks the same, but we're saving like 1,000, megabytes.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's especially if you have multiple images and like it could be so much that you're saving, right? It makes so much sense that the internet would want us to do this, and would be pissed if we didn't. Kind of.
Yeah, it definitely it just makes sense. So what we're going to do here is make sure we're at JPEG high. Make sure we're set to 960 because that's the image size we worked with. Everything should be fine. Everything should be fine. And I'm going to hit save. Right, we're in the Save for Web. And once I do that, all I want to do is make sure that I name it appropriately. This was the 960 pixel one. So I just say museum-960 and I save it. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move down. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to resize it again. So image size, and from 960 down to 720. It'll automatically constrain everything. I hit OK, and then I can continue with that same process of redoing the size. So again, image size, change it down to 720 pixels. Once I'm done that, it should go a lot quicker now for you. File, export, save for web. So file, export, save for web. We could use save as, but export, save for web, as we've already proven, saves a lot of space, right? In this case, we're going to go from 854 kilobytes down to 100 kilobytes. So 8 times the saving. Like it's an insane amount of savings. So we're at 720. I save it, museum-720. Okay. And I'm just using the first grid, 960, 720, 480, 320. That's all I'm doing. I don't even want, it doesn't matter one time. So I'm going to create, resize and resave for each one of those 4. All right. Once I've got those done, we're going to take a break here in a few minutes before we go any further. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the next step. There is an option if you guys want to, and here's the code is literally in the slide. You can do the square version as well. So if we look at it, it says, we notice that this is square. I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to require you to do that. If you want to try different aspect ratios using the picture tag as well, the code is right here, and between you and me and the wall, it's set up to do basically the same thing. All we have to do is make sure we change the name of the files appropriately, and then the aspect ratio of them. In this case, we'll have to do some other manipulation about like canvas sizing and stuff like that, but I'm not going to do that with you. The only requirement that I'm worried about is to make sure that we understand sizes and source set. Okay, that's the big thing. Okay, anybody who's watching this video now knows. Okay, all right, Mitchell.
Sorry, what are the other image sizes we're doing? I've got the 960, but I kind of.
So if you go to the actual assignment outline, it'll display them right here under the landscape image: 960, 720, 480. And 320. Okay, it's under the first chart under one time or viewport for the ones we're doing. I'm going to leave that with you guys. We're going to take a 15-minute break. I'm going to let you guys do that. And when we come back, honestly, guys, this is the amount of code we have to write. Okay, it's not going to take long. I just want to walk us through it. All right, so don't worry about that. We're going to come back. We'll get this done. Save as a, well, hang on. Don't save as a JPEG. File, export, save for web, right? And it's going to give you this option here. when you click save at the bottom right, okay, it says, how do you want to save it? We've already chosen, sorry, it should be clarified. Yes, it's going to say JPEG up here. Yes, so yes, okay, it is going to do that. So yeah, you'll want to save that, and it should set up automatically. Make sure you appropriately name it. If you're working on I can see down on the bottom right here, it says image size 720. Make sure you name museum-720 appropriately, and it'll save as a JPEG. Just choose high. You can choose a lower, all kinds of different options, but just choose high. It's the standard. Sorry, Mitchell, do you have a question? Is your hand
No,
just still
sorry,
up?
my hand was just still up. Sorry.
That's okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Can you imagine if this was we were in person, you just left your hand up and forgot?
Thought about that before.
Yeah.
We were in class and they're doing that.
Hopefully in winter, guys. Winter next semester, next year. Yeah, you guys will go on your break, come back, and we're really. I think the goal is to be off this between you. It's just us. I think the goal is to be back in person in January. I don't know any more details. I think that's what the goal is, but you guys will get information about that as we go forward. So, anyway, with that said, get all that done. I'm going to set up a timer. We're going to take a 15-minute break because I want to make sure there's 15 minutes every hour if possible. We're going to come back. That leaves us another hour, and we're just going to flesh it out. Like I said, there's 5 lines of code to write. Not a big problem. Okay, so let's set up a 15-minute break. If you need the dimensions, again, just look inside of the picture this. We're only doing the landscape. You don't have to worry about the square. We're not going to do the picture tag. Okay, I'm fine with that. If you use, I want to make it clear before I start anything else. If you use a placeholder image like placeholder.com or dummyimage.com, you will get 50% deducted from this grade. You must resize the provided image. Okay, just what we're doing right now. We just spent 45 minutes going through it. So anybody who's going to try and resubmit what they did last semester using placeholder images is going to lose 50% immediately. Okay, just so we're on the same page. Just because some people haven't been logging in and reading this stuff, and I have to make little changes so that people don't resubmit the same thing that they tried last semester, because that's a violation of Algonquin College policy. You can't get graded twice for the same assignment. Okay, so we're making a little change just to accommodate that. Okay, I'm going to set a 15-minute timer. 15-minute timer. Any information you need is available in the actual OnDAC assignment for picture this. And other than that, I'm going to set this up, and I will be back in 15 minutes. Thanks, guys. All right, guys, we're back. Okay, hopefully everyone made it back. So by now, we should have Museum 320, 480, 720, and 960 ready to go inside of our setup. Okay, I'm just gonna open up sorry, I'm just gonna open up in live server the preview. Okay, let's see what we have here. My goodness, something that looks like this. This is unnecessarily large as far as pictures go. So I want to show you guys first off, I'm going to open up my style sheet. I want to show you first off what we can do with responsive images. So let's set that up first. I'm going to go right to line 33 of my style sheet, and I'm going to start by setting up my responsive image code. I'm going to add it, and then I'm going to remove it after so we can do a different technique. But I want to show this to you first. Max, oops, on the image tag, max width 100%, right? Be up to 100% of your full size. We can see now this image is, the full size is way too big. We would all agree on that. The image is way too big. So what we can do is say, be up to 100% of your maximum width, and also height auto. Now, once we save this, we're going to see something happen. By default, this works beautifully. No HTML required. Why? Because the image will always be 100% of the, up to 100% of its size, which means it'll grow or shrink accordingly. Wonderful, right? If it was only that simple to get grades in this class. So we need a little bit more than that, but I wanted to prove to you that having the CSS is great. Now, the difference is that we do know, this, by the way, is a standard. I always use this. I'll talk to you about this going forward for your assignment, but for your other assignments. The midterm has a images criteria that is going to require responsive images, okay, using techniques or variations of that. We're learning today, but this is great. But now this is super, but this is only a small percentage, like maybe 10% or whatever of the full image. If I open that image in a new tab, I can still clearly see that this image at full size is too big. I've still had to load the full 5,472 by 3,080 image, even though I'm only showing it at this small size. Does that illustrate the issue that we're trying to solve here? It's a huge file. Yeah, it's a huge file to have to load just for that little image. So I'm going to block this comment out for now. I'm going to highlight them both and hit either Command or Control and slash, or just type in comments, block them out, and then save it. Go back to our original format. Let's see if we can fix this issue in the index.html before the CSS even loads. And then I'm going to show you a little hybrid version of both of these. We know that this works great. So I like using this in conjunction with the source set. That's what we're going to do. Okay, so I'm going to head over to index.html. And I have my image tag here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break, I don't want to put everything in one long line. So I'm going to break this up into multiple lines. So I'm going to go hit enter and tab just because I'm inside of it. I'm going to hit enter. I'm tabbed in. And then I'm going to go above the source and add and get ready to add something new. Okay. Notice there's a closing tag. There's an opening tag. This is all the same thing. I'm just putting space inside of it so I can just see the source set images a little nicer. I can do that with anything I want to. If I could make lines, no problem. It just makes it cleaner for me to work with. Okay. So again, what did I do? I just use enter. Enter. That's all I've done. And then of course I tabbed it just because it makes it nice and clean. Okay. Now I'm going to add another line now, and I'm going to work on my, it doesn't matter what order to, I could have my default stuff first, right? I'm just going to put it after. Now there's two things I want to work on. I want to add a source set and I want to add sizes, but I'm going to start with source set. And what source set is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to create a whole set of images, okay, different sizes. And you can imagine what they are. I'm going to start from the smallest and work my way up during these sizes. Okay, so what do we have to work with? I'm just going to open up my images folder over here and I can see all my image files. Nice. Okay, so if I'm moving too quickly, guys, stop me. Okay, don't let me go beyond where you guys are comfortable because we have to be learning this, right? So at this stage of the game, if we're good, go forward, I've just added a source set. Make sure now, guys, make sure your spelling and your punctuation is correct. So in the last group, we had someone who did SCR set, and it was very hard to spot, and we couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. So be very careful about your spelling. We're looking for SRC set, just like this, SRC source. We're making a set of these source images. And I'm going to go inside there, and I'm going to start by linking to my first smallest one, which is 320. So does anybody, how would I link that up? What am I going to type in here to get to that image?
Do images / museum and then the file name. So museum-320.jpg.
Right. Like I don't have to do HTTP or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, so that's good. Images / museum -320.jpg. So once I have this in there, okay, I'm going to put a space and I'm going to put the corresponding width. In this case, 320W or 320 pixels wide. Okay, so now it knows this image is going to correspond with this size. Pretty simple. What do you guys think? That's not difficult, right? Let's add another one. Comma, because comma means we're going to say and. Here's another image. And I'm going to tab that in. Might as well go all the way to so we're in line with them. The next one is what? 480 images / museum. Can I help someone with something or?
-420 or 480, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were asking me a question. So, okay, -480.jpg. And then we just continue, right? We put a space And the corresponding size for this one is 480W. Again, these are arbitrary. We can choose the numbers we want to. I'm just choosing these numbers because they were in the image grid. That's what works for me. We're going to do another one. So you see what we're doing. We're just following a suit. Images. And where am I getting these from? Look over here on the left. I can, if I open my images folder, I can see. I can also manually see them inside of here. Okay, that was just setting up our images correctly, making sure I'm spelling them as I go. Images / museum-720.jpg. I put a space and I say 720W. And the last one is going to be 960. So I don't need to put anything after that. So the last one is images / museum-960.jpg. Set the size to 960W, and I don't need a comma after this because there's no more. We made 4 images. Those are the 4 images. Typically, I'd choose a smaller image than museum. The default would be probably about the same size as the largest one. I'm just going to leave it for now. Actually, no, I'm not. Let's fix it. I'm not. -960.jpg, because there's no sense having the default image 5,000 pixels. And I just told you not to do that. The largest image we have should be fine for the largest size. That way, if none of these work, it'll still show me the largest size, but still not a 5,000 pixel wide image, which is kind of the point. Come up with a better name for placeholder for alt. I'm going to say what paintings in a museum, whatever makes sense. And before I hit save, we're going to, I'm going to let you guys get caught up. Or I'll hit save. That's fine. We'll save it. I'll make sure it's saved. And then we're going to see some stuff is going to happen over on this side. We're not quite there yet, but we'll see. Okay. Hopefully you guys got that figured out. I'm going to hit enter or hit save, and I'm going to go look at what I have over here. Okay. At the smallest size, we should be good. Okay. It's matching in there matching in there pretty good already. And then once we get to 960 pixels, it wants to break into its own, but we have a weird issue. The image is 960 because I've removed the responsive image code. So it's 960 no matter what. It's not fitting nicely into my grid. And why is that? It's because we haven't told it we haven't used the sizes attribute to tell it how to display 50 VW, right? We want it to be 50% of the viewport width to fit in nicely into our grid. Does that make sense? You guys are with me? This is where sizes comes in handy. Now, I could tell it to automatically fit and stuff, but I can see over here, it's trying to stay exactly 960 pixels. If I go to inspect, I'm going to empty the cache. Okay. And yeah, it wants to be 960 pixels. Open that image. I can see it's the 960. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go into my index and I'm going to fix that with the sizes attribute. Okay. Is everybody with me so far, or is anybody it's not working for them?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. All right. We can always go back and record. If there's an issue, it's almost guaranteed going to be a spelling or a grammar issue here. You forgot to add a comma. You said, image instead of images, something like that. So I'm going to add this sizes attribute, and the sizes attribute just basically allows us to fit it however we want to into our allow the image to fit into our layout at a certain breakpoint. Okay, we're not touching our style sheet yet, so I'm going to go after the source set, and I'm going to go back to the beginning. And I'm going to say sizes. Okay, it's plural equals. And I'm going to get ready for this. And what I'm going to do in this case is I know that it's 100% viewport width by default, but I know that my layout only has 2 breakpoints. One of them is here at 960. I'm going to have the columns all fitting in here, but I want to fit the image to match that. Right? Minimum width is 960. Oops. Okay, and I see the template is going to be 1 FR and 1 FR for my 2 columns. So I need the images to fit that. So in the sizes, I'm going to first start off by saying a bracket. I'm going to say min width, just like we would with anything else. I want to match what's going on in my style sheet, 960 pixels. No semicolon, nothing like that. I put a space and I say 50 VW or 50% of viewport width. So now when we hit the minimum width of 960 pixels, the image, no matter which size we choose, is going to display at 50% of the viewport width, which means it'll fit nicely into our 1 out of 2 and 1 out of 2 columns. Does that make sense when I put it like that? We're just matching up what's happening here. Okay. And then I say, but if that criteria isn't met, like if we are below the minimum width of 960, so comma, then we're just going to do 100 VW, 100% of viewport width. That's the default, right? Again, if we go back to the style sheet, the default is right here. 1 FR out of, so right, 1 out of 1 times it's being displayed equals 100% of the width, or 100% of VW, right? So if I do that, that's the default. And then when I hit my media query at a min width of 960, we are now at we have 2 of them, right? There's 2. So 1 column out of 2 and 2 columns out of 2, or 50% each. That's what 1 out of 2 means, right? So because of that, when we hit 960, we need it to be 50% of the viewport width. Does that help you guys? Can you visualize how that's going to work? Anyone with any questions before we can move forward and take a look how this looks? Okay, I save it. There we go. No more scroll bars. Okay, it's matching. Looks great. Anybody have an issue where that did not work for them? Okay, does everybody understand why it works the way it does? Okay, great. I'll assume you do. So there's one other thing I want to talk to you guys about before we go on with, before we do anything else with this, and that is, let's prove that this image works. And in doing so, I'm going to show you a little kind of a weird failing or something. Okay, so a couple of things about this. If your text, you mean, are you talking about in the Visual Studio Code or on the page? Okay. And this has happened before. When you are doing any type of designing, the first thing you should do is reset your palette. Just like we reset our code, we reset our palette. I'm willing to bet that some of you, at least, if you go to your zoom, is going to be set to a different percentage, right? Oh, F11, sorry. We want to hit Command or Control 0, and that'll set the zoom back to 100%. So and this is the problem, guys. When you submit something to me, if you are working in Zoom, as you can see, it's going to affect the visual. So when I come to view it, you send it to me, and you've been designing for, say, 150%. But when I view it, I'm viewing it at 100%. Do you see what just happened there? My view is completely different than what you've expected. So make sure you always set your view to 100% before you start working. And you can do that very simply. Control for Windows or Command for Mac, and the number 0 on the top of your keyboard. Control or Command 0 will reset. The plus will make it go bigger. The minus, Control or minus, will make it go smaller. But Control 0 will always reset it back to 100%. Okay, that's number one important thing. Before I move forward, there's a question. I don't understand why you did use the 50 VW and the 100 VW in the sizes attribute. Okay, let's talk about that right here. So the output, the goal of this, as we can see, was to achieve something like this, right? We want to have mobile first, which is in the beginning, the image, whichever image is chosen, doesn't matter the image size, is going to be 100% of the window. Okay, and that's evident in the style sheet here. We're going to have one column. So we want the image to fit directly into one column. So heading, text, and then the image, right? It's going to be in a column like setup. So, and then we say, but then at the, sorry, once we hit the minimum width of 960 pixels, we're going to have two columns, two equal width columns, which is 50%. So I need to tell it to fit this image into that spot. So it's kind of like a placeholder, and it's going to fit the appropriate image it chooses into the 50% breakpoint, right? So it's basically like setting a sizing on it. So when we hit a minimum width of 960, make it 50% of the viewport width. But if we don't hit that criteria, right? This is just saying, check to see if we're at a minimum width of 960. If we are, make it 50, make it fit into a 50% viewport width. And if we aren't, we don't hit that criteria, which means if we're between 0 and 959 pixels, make it 100%. There it is. 100% of the viewport width, make it 50% of the viewport width, just so it'll fit inside the column structure we already created, right? Because remember, this is all loading, guys, before the CSS ever loads. Right? So see, when I go bigger, it's still working. There it is at a lower size. Once I go beyond 960, it's fitting that 50% viewport width after I've removed the style sheet. When I add the style sheet back on, it's still going to fit nicely. Okay, I want to show you guys one more thing about this. I want to prove this works. Okay, Jessica, real quick, go ahead.
I was just noticing on mine, and at some points when you're changing the size of the browser width, there's a scroll bar on the bottom. Does that matter? Why would that be there? And it looks like it's because the image is just slightly larger than I've got my browser width set to 640 pixels right now.
Yep.
And there's a scroll bar at the bottom, and I'm just wondering why.
Okay, well, there's a caveat I'm going to show you guys in the future here to fix this issue. But I want to let's just make sure we're choosing the right image. We'll start with that. So one of the caveats about doing everything with HTML is that because the HTML loads first, it's quick, right? It's going to render all this before the style sheet even loads. But the downfall is that once it renders it, it's chosen the largest image. And so it could be that you're already choosing a wrong size image, and we don't have, remember, we removed this responsive image block. So let's just see if it works. I want to show you guys something, a case in point to prove a value to you. I'm going to make it go, if we should all be designing in Google, I've said many times, that's how I grade. We can use inspector. So, right, the inspector. So we should, if you're opening in Safari or Firefox or something, I don't know how many times, you got to open it in Google Chrome. Just grab that, move it into Google Chrome, and open it in Google Chrome. Okay. I want to show you guys something. Now, when I'm going to move to my, actually, no, I can do it from here. I'm going to open the inspector, just general, and I'm going to move the inspector. I'm not on responsive mode because I think responsive mode, it's weird, doesn't work sometimes. Okay. I'm just going to make it like really small, just something like that, like 266. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to because I'm in inspector mode, I can quickly empty my cache. I do that by going up here to only in Chrome, right? Chrome inspector lives in Chrome. I'm going to go up here to the refresh. I'm going to use my right mouse button, not the left one, because that'll refresh it. I want to right click it. It'll open a menu, and one of them is empty cache and hard reload. I'm going to do that. Now that I've done that, I'm on this is loading fresh. I'm going to look at the image I have, right click that image and say, open a new tab, 320. Great. That's the one we wanted. That's the smallest breakpoint we have. So it's choosing it. Let's move it a little bit bigger till we hit the next breakpoint. You'll physically see it change. There it goes. I'm going to open, hang on, are we there? 480. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to open this up again. Open a new image, a new tab, right click the image, open a new tab. Okay, we're at 720. I guess because I'm over it, right? 720. Okay, that's where I wanted to be. I just missed it. Now watch, I'm going to go back again, all the way to the small one, and I'm going to open that image up. 720. Here's the caveat with this is because it's not meant, most people don't browse by making their screen bigger and smaller. They don't do that. That's not how people browse typically. What it's doing is it's choosing the appropriate size when the HTML loads, and then it's going to use that consistently, okay? As we get bigger, it's going to load the next bigger one, okay? But there's no sense in loading a smaller one again that's already loaded, so it'll just always use the highest one that's been loaded. Does that make sense? We just proved that in theory. I'm going to show you again. At the smallest breakpoint, I'm going to right click on the refresh, and I'm going to empty the cache again. So now there's no more images stuck in the browser. What it's going to do is, now that I've loaded, I refresh, I loaded, it's going to load the image that the appropriate choice, in this case, 320. When I make it go to the next breakpoint, 480, I can see there it worked, 480. But if I go back, there's no sense for it to go and reload the 320 again, because it's already loaded both. It already loaded 320 and 480. So it's just going to lose 480 because it's already been loaded in the cache. It's already sitting in memory in our computer anyway. So if I open this up, we'll see it's 480. The only way to get around that is to empty the cache and hard reload again. But the damage has already been done. We've already loaded that image. So the fact is, what I'm saying is it's always going to load the highest breakpoint. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Did that fix your problem when you refreshed it?
When I opened it in Chrome, it doesn't have the scroll bar. I guess I must have had it open in like Microsoft Edge, is just what it automatically opens. But when I reopened it in Chrome, it's gone.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Edge is a weird one. Chrome is just a better browser. It's a modern browser. Edge is really sketchy. Okay, so let's fix the issue. Let's just fix that issue. So I like using this. Now we could go and we could get a square value and all those other things, and that's fine. But I'm just going to empty it one more time, close it. Okay, now we could do that. What I also like to do is use this in conjunction with always making sure I've got responsive image code set. So I'm just going to go back here and uncomment that, which control or command slash, or just retype max width 100% height auto. And when I save it, now not only do I have the proper sized image loading, the smallest image possible is going to load first, but it's also now going to fix any image issues, inconsistencies that we might have like that by making it responsive. So I'll bet you with that loaded, if you went back and viewed it in your original browser, it would probably, in Edge, it would probably work, because it's going to force it to fit within the container. Okay, so I would make sure I have that running as well. So this is just the best practices. Now, and this is, guys, this is like, listen, if we're going to be making a website and it's going to be used, on a desktop, I mean, for most people, you don't have to worry about this. We're coming out of this program and we want to get a job, right? You're not doing this because you want to work for free for the rest of your life. It's a competitive market. And in order to jump out of this and get a job, you want to show them that you can make fast loading, lean web pages that are going to load quick, and they're going to be, optimized. And this is one of those things that you can do very simply to optimize, right? You can use this very simply to optimize by loading up only the most appropriate image. This becomes really easy when you're using a piece of software that automatically does this, like WordPress. So we can create that image, no problem. And it's just a better way of doing things going forward. Does that make sense, guys? It's going to give you the competitive edge when you're sitting in a room and there's 20 people there applying for the same job, and you're going to come in and you have nicely formatted code. It's commented properly so they can look at this and say, this person understands. Like I would say, right, I would come in here and I would make an HTML comment and say, select only the most or only the smallest image necessary. Now you've just proven them a couple of things. Number one, you know what the code does. Number two, you're thinking about speed, accessibility, leanness. Number two, you're putting this out correctly. I know that was, you can't put that inside of a tag or inside of a HTML tag, but right. You're thinking about these things. That's why I want you guys to start thinking the way we do. And I'm not because I'm a jerk. I just want you to think like that. And this is just going to help you in the end. Okay, so if you've done this and it works, let's push it to GitHub right now and be done with this assignment. And then I'll move on and talk to you about the last little part of this class. I can see there's some changes to be made. I'm just going to make sure I'm saved. I can go back to my style, make sure that I've got the only thing I added here was under image. I said I want all images to be, instead of saying a width of 100, watch what happens when I say width 100%. Oh, it's going to be, yeah, sorry, because I've already set it over here. This is a HTML fix on it. But if I say width 100%, it wants to be its full width all the time. So if I say max width, it means up to 100% of its full size, and height auto is just going to automatically fix itself to that size. Pretty straightforward. So that's the only CSS I've added. I save it. The index should look like mine. I save, and we should have a working, it should work. Okay. If it doesn't work, watch the video again, go back, give it a try. Okay, it'll work. And if not, you can see the SPA or give me, if the SPA can't help, then send me an email, and I don't mind pushing the assignment, okay, a little bit for anybody who is in class today. With that said, if it works right now, let's go ahead. I've made the save. You see, I've got a couple of U's there. What does that mean, guys? When I see U beside all these things in my source code editor here, what does that mean?
It's
untracked.
Yeah, untracked.
Awesome. And that just means that it isn't what I have on my local machine, which is what I have in this folder, what I have here does not match up with what's actually on GitHub. So I need to push that. So I'm going to go down here to my source control GUI. It says there's 9 pending changes. You might have 8. I've just removed one. I'm going to push everything. So what I'm going to do is I want to stage everything here. I could just stage individual files. That's a pain in my keister. I'm going to stage everything by going up to where it says changes and clicking plus there. Stage all changes. Right beside where it says how many changes, stage all. Mine's going to be missing a file too. You don't have to worry about that. Once I do this, now everything goes from changes to staged changes. Tell me if I'm going too quickly, guys. Everything goes from changes over to staged changes. We should see an index.html, a readme, style.css, and several image folders in there, or files in there. Now I need to make a proper message. It's the wrong message, guys. I don't know how many times to tell you, please do not submit that. You're going to go through all this time to make nice code, and your new the person who's trying to hire you is going to look and say that's nice, but when they look on your commits and they see this as a message, they're immediately going to round file. They're going to be, this person, this is not useful for anyone else in the organization who's trying to figure out what this commit does. So now we're going to make a proper message for the commit. In this case, what does this do? This commit creates picture this assignment. So it just creates the assignment. It's going to give you all the core files or whatever you want that makes sense to you. But we usually talk in terms of, if you're asking a question, what does this do? It adds the museum-320 image, or it updates index.html file with new title, right? Things like that. In this case, it creates picture this assignment. Once I'm done, I can hit the arrow or command or control enter to commit. That just means we're good and ready to rock. And I can go down here, I can see up and down. I have one ready to go up, one change that needs to be made between my computer and their computer. And there's nothing that's different on their computer from mine aside from what I have. When I say their computer, I mean GitHub. So I'm going to push it. Click the button. In my case, because whatever, it's going to push it to master, no problem. It's going to think about it. It's going to think about it, thinking about it, thinking about it, and then it's done. Okay. If you got an error, hold tight. If it worked for you, let's just go and verify. Okay. If you got an error, hold tight. I'm just going to go verify that it works now. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to load up my github.com, which we know is my repository / my username. This is just going to load my repository, right? So if it says github.io with the username, that's the page we're going to submit. But right now we're just looking at the repository. Let's click it and see. There it is. Picture this. This is these. It tells me when I made 1 minute ago, at exactly this time. Yes, I checked that when you submit. That's how I know if you submitted late. When I check that, it says 1 minute ago, there was a commit made, and the commit, this particular commit I made 1 minute ago, creates the picture this assignment. That's why this is so important, right? So no problem. I'm going to click that now. I can see the green thing. It says all checks have passed, which means this should be accessible now. How do I find that link? Well, I can see kingsbr.github.io. I can see right here, / picture this. Okay. kingsbr.github.io / picture -this. There's my working website. Okay. If there's no green check mark and it's still orange, it's just, you just have to give it a minute. Right. I just went to the address kingsbr.github.io. That's my username.github.io / whatever my structure might be. In this case, I want to go to picture this. So that / picture this. I would not copy this at any time. Don't do that. When you actually get this, if you get here and it's working for you, highlight the link in the address bar, copy it and submit it, and you are done the in-class for today. That's it. Now, a couple of hands. It didn't work for me. Okay. Mitchell, I saw your hand go up first. If you want to, what's going on?
I don't have a problem uploading it. I just want to know, how do you double check that, like when you're resizing the page, that it is picking the right like image?
Okay, great question. So, because we always like to validate and troubleshoot anyway. So let's just do that. I'm going to, in Google Chrome, I'm going to right click and go to inspect at the very bottom. Just right click anywhere that's not on an image or something. But even then, it doesn't matter. I'm going to right click, go to inspect. First thing I want to do is just grab the side of the inspector bar. You can change how it's displayed by going up here on the right hand side. There's 3 dots, and you can usually put on the right. Doesn't matter as long as you can shrink it this way too. I'm going to shrink it down. And then once the inspector tool is open, it allows me to clear my cache by right clicking on the reload button on the top right here and say empty cache hard reload. And because I'm at the smallest size already, I'm just going to right click the image and open the image in a new tab. And I can see that I'm at 320. I've cleared my cache, so I'm just checking now at 320. And as I grow larger, I just do it again, a little bit bigger, 480. It is resized. I think that proves that it is resizing. It's not going to work when we go backwards, because as I described earlier, it's always going to show the biggest one only. But as I move up, it'll always show the largest one. Right? Does that answer your question?
Yep, exactly.
Perfect. Rob, what can I do for you?
So I was just wondering, this was something Travis told us we could do last semester. So I'm wondering, like, your stance, I guess, on it for submitting. When I like type in my link as just picture this, it doesn't load. But if I add like a / and index.html, it does. Would that be like a fine submission?
Yep, that's absolutely fine. The big thing for me is ensuring that when you submit so the GitHub paging site lives at username.github.io. If you submit me kingsbr, or if you submit me, github.com right away without anything else, .com, it's wrong.
Yeah, totally.
/kingsbr, that's going to take you to, if I look at that, that's going to take you to, this is not this isn't a website you built. I can't grade that, right? So making sure that it's username.github.io. After that, whatever structure you have for this assignment, only until we get to the end, the very last assignment, is fine. It doesn't matter.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions about this? Okay. All right, so did that work for everyone? No issues? Great. Was that useful, guys? It's kind of a cool thing. Now, again, this is gonna get you hired, but they're gonna say, but you really don't have to do that. I mean, it's really not something that that you have to do a lot of, but I have to give you guys the best practices. I use this. I've proven to you, I've used this in my production websites. If you want to take this to the next level and really learn how to do it, go to the slides and take a look at slide 31, which shows you the picture set. It just shows you, I could really copy and paste this in and change the images and stuff and just match up what I have here, images /museum 320 with images, and do this for each, and then also make a square image, and we could probably match it right up. I'm not requiring that of you today. I think this illustrates enough what to do. And if you want to take it to the next level, there you go. I don't want to get overly confusing with you guys. And as you can see, we're out of time anyway. Okay. So with that said, we have learned how to do this. We've all pushed it. You have until midnight tonight to push this, not 12:01, not 12:04. I hate having to give someone a 0 because they submitted at 12:01. So you have until midnight, and I will. I just don't be late, right? You have until, if there's an issue, whatever, if you're in class and you're having an issue that you need to push the time, no problem. If you're not in class and you need to push, sorry, I'm not going to extend it for you. Too bad, so sad, show up to class. But aside from that, let's take a look at the best practices of this really quickly because we have a few minutes. I'm going to go back over to the IMDAC. And I'm going to open up, go to responsive web 2, and I'm going to open up assignments, and I'm going to go down here to the midterm for the prototype. Now, as I scroll down, there's a few things I want to show you something. There is a criteria worth 10% of your total mark for imagery. This encompasses a few things. One of those things, let's take a look at what at the lowest point, it's the site images were of poor quality and or were not responsive. You know, it's an ice cream website. If you're building an ice cream website and there's a picture of football players all over it, well, it better be ice cream players for footballs, right? If there's pictures of a horse, you get my idea, right? It's probably going to have ice cream related or fun stuff or snacks or sunny days, something like that, right? Make sure the images are related to the content, okay? That they're, you know, they don't look like the grainy, when I had the cat earlier and it looked like an old terrible GIF or a meme or something with all the white streaks through it. Make sure that's properly good. And then beyond that, the images are not like 5,000 megapixels wide. And that's, you know, so this basically says you didn't do any of that. The average is going to say, okay, they were of good quality and they were responsive, which means you added this to all your images, super duper. Okay. And, but they weren't optimized or enhanced for the overall user experience. You didn't do this. Okay, that's going to get you in the 6 to 8 point range. If you want to get the full 10 points, I'm going to want to see responsive image code. And I'm also going to want to see all of your images are using this type of thing. It's up to you to decide, and I'm properly using this. It's up to you to decide, is it worth the 4% or 2% of difference? I don't know, maybe not, okay? If you do this, I'm fine with that. Okay, but it's going to cost you points. I mean, that's what it is. If you want to make it's easy to get to satisfactory, because I'll be honest with you guys, most of the time in my websites, I do this. I make sure that my images are at most, if the biggest they're going to appear on the web page is 500 pixels, I reduce the size of my image to 500 pixels, and then I do this. So I'm doing at least a good step forward. But in some websites for really high-end clients, when they're paying me like, you know, here's like $9,000 to build a website or $10,000 or something, then yeah, they're going to get the full treatment with all the images and stuff. And that's the difference between 6 to 8 points and 10 points, and really puts it out there. Remember, guys, this is the midterm. This is going to be portfolio quality work. So when you submit in this line of work, they don't say, send me your websites. They say, let me see your GitHub. And then they're going to see your commits. Do you know how to use GitHub? Do you make good messages? They're going to look in and they're going to say, oh, they have good responsive image code. And do they have, here they do. And they're going to look back and say, oh, they have all the different images, or they're not. And I mean, it just depends on you. This is portfolio work for you. Put your best foot forward, but then making sure that you have all of this working properly is probably not as important as making sure that the layout, layout and design, which is worth 50% of your total, is done properly. Do you see what I mean? You have to weigh those two things out. Okay, but I am requiring you to make sure that the images are, you know, properly, like you're just paying attention to the images and making them responsive. Okay, does that make sense? Is that fair? I think that's a pretty fair thing. We've learned how to do it now. Okay. So that's that going forward, making sure that that's a standard. So get this submitted, guys, and you're good. I just want to make sure there's nothing else. Is there any questions about anything, submissions, or, you know, whatever? I just want one more time. I just wanted to tell you guys, just to be sure, if I go into picture this, okay, and click on index.html or whatever, please do not highlight this link and copy it and submit it. This is what's going to happen, is going to create a link that when I click on it, it's going to take me back to github.com, right? I just want to make sure we all understand that. That's all I have for you today, guys. I really apologize for taking a phone call in the middle of the meeting or middle of our class today. It can be hard sometimes to track down healthcare, and so when they call you, you have to do it.
Dentist, man, too. It's important. It's almost the most important. Dentist.
If I told you what was going on, you'd be like, "Oh my god, it's pretty terrible." So yeah, when your mouth doesn't work, you need to get that fixed. So I appreciate that, guys. My apologies in advance, or I guess my apologies again. That's it. If you guys have any questions about anything, feel free to hit me up, send me an email. If you have any suggestions, Rob, I think you're moving too fast. I hate your voice. I bet you have a beard and it looks dumb, whatever it might be. Please be nice to me, but you can send me any message you want to, any email, and I'll try my best to get to it. But if there's something just small that's not related and it's not time sensitive, like it needs to get done right away, please see the SPA first. Do you guys need a refresher on how to find that information? Does anybody need a refresher on how to find that information to access the SPA? Because he's a great resource. Okay, all right. If anybody has anything otherwise, just send me an email. And have a great day, guys. I really appreciate your coming and being a part of that. Get this submitted. Have a super one. Great week. Stay in the cool as much as possible. It gets really hot.
You too, Rob. You too. Take care.
Thanks, folks.
Happy dentist.
Happy dentistry.
Sounded sarcastic, but I mean, dentists suck, but when you go get it handled, it's the best. So
yeah, it does. Yeah. Close my mouth again.
Take care. Thanks again.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Mitchell. Take care, guys. Have a good one. Stop recording.